Warrior Lore. Chapter 25-23. Long Qianchao possessed the Dragon Abyss Talisman and could control the primordial Nirvana dragon formation to a certain extent. Countless golden dragon phantoms responded to his summons and roared into action, gathering around Long Qianchao's massive body. Along the way, the golden dragon phantoms disintegrated and turned into talisman runes that blotted out the sky. These runes then bolstered Long Qianchao's body, forming a golden dragon phantom the size of a mountain ridge that lay in the air. Long Qianchao's body was more than twice as large as its initial form. Nirvana dragon swallows the sky. Kill. Long Qianchao let out such a loud shout. As the huge dragon twisted its body, the golden dragon around it also moved. Roar. The golden dragon phantom roared, opening its mouth like a bottomless black hole. It was terrifying and intimidating. As the dragon's roar fell, the space within the talisman formation collapsed as if the backbone of the earth had suddenly snapped. An incomparably strong suction force surged from the dragon's mouth as if to swallow everything. A terrifying might surged in this space, shattering the countless dragon phantoms that the talisman formation had conjured and sucked them in. Little Star and the three Saint Realm experts in the midst of a great battle shuddered at the same time. Even though they were very far away, they could still feel the tremendous tearing force invading every inch of their flesh. Du Xiaofu, who was at the center of the force, bore the brunt of the pressure. He divided his attention to control the Scarlet Horse Monkey's nascent spirit and several bolts of spirit lightning at the same time to defend against Long Qianchao's attack. Faced with such a terrifying might, he seemed to be powerless. Du Xiaofu, hand over your life. A deafening roar came from Long Qianchao's body. The golden dragon phantom lifted its head and swooped down at his command, swallowing Du Xiaofu whole before he could even resist. In the end, he entered Long Qianchao's mouth. After Du Xiaofu's figure disappeared, the Scarlet Horse Monkey's nascent spirit in the Nirvana Dragon Abyss lost control and dissipated as well. Only a few bolts of spirit lightning were left outside, still whining and releasing lightning that filled the sky. At this moment, even more dragons had gathered outside the talisman formation. When they saw that Du Xiaofu had been swallowed by Long Qianchao like a whale, their faces relaxed and they all laughed heartily. The dragons of our Nirvana Dragon Abyss is not a place where a little thief can do as he pleases. No matter how powerful this Du Xiaofu is, he can forget about breaking the Nirvana Primordial Nirvana Dragon formation. Patriarch. With the help of the primordial Nirvana Dragon formation, killing him is as easy as flipping over your hand. That's right, that this kid is. Everyone was in the Nilva. Qianchao. God, Dragon Du Xiaofu being swallowed into the dragon's stomach also made the distant little star feel anxious. His dragon body swept across, its wings flapped, and its tail lashed out, forcing the three dragon Saint Realm powerhouses to retreat. Then, it charged in Long Qianchao's direction. Little thing, where do you think you're going? You want to rescue that thief Du Xiaofu? Have you asked for our permission? The three dragons waved their palms and transformed into their true forms to block Star Nn's Nilva Dragon Abyss. The three dragons' true forms hovered in the air and roared with their heads held high, enveloped in a monstrous aura. Get lost. Star Nn's Nilva Dragon Abyss roared. Lightning shot out from its claws and blocked the three saints. At the same time, a hazy golden light bloomed from its body and gathered on its wings. Gee! A bird's cry broke out. This was the great golden-winged rock clan's ultimate skill. It increased its speed greatly and broke away from the three's encirclement in the blink of an eye. Soon, the Nilva Dragon Abyss was in front of Long Qianchao. It swept its wings and endless flames spread out. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The Vermilion Bird Clan's ultimate skill was unleashed. Raging flames covered the sky and swept across the land. The terrifying heat invaded and burned the air red like metal, as if it was going to melt. The golden dragon shadow around Long Qianchao was quickly being consumed by the terrifying temperature. The talisman runes melted into liquid form and flowed along the void. Then, they evaporated and disappeared into nothingness. If we were in the outside world, I would be somewhat afraid of you. But in this primordial Nirvana Dragon formation, Even Du Xiaofu can't do anything to me. How dare a little bastard like you act so presumptuously in front of me? Long Qianchao opened his mouth and glared at Little Star. Even if you have an extraordinary background, don't think that I won't dare to kill you. Roar. As Long Qianchao roared, golden dragon phantoms danced within the immemorial Nirvana dragon formation like locusts that filled the sky. Countless dragons twisted their bodies and continued to converge on Long Qianchao, causing the giant dragon around him to become even more majestic. Even the terrifying power of Little Star could not stop this amplification. Today, I will send you and your daughter on your way. Long Qianchao roared. His dragon tail swiftly swung, carrying a tremendous power. It suddenly struck Little Xingxing's body. Boom! The violent collision was like the sound of heavenly thunder. The blazing flames on Little Star's wings were extinguished. Her body, which did not appear huge, was sent flying with one blow. Outside the talisman formation, a group of dragons experts watched and discussed. Everyone could not help but feel extremely pleased when Little Star was repelled. So what if she's the daughter of the dragon god? She wants to order us dragons around just because she has an extraordinary background? Simply wishful thinking. That's right. Today, we'll kill this little thing and do Xiaofu together. I don't believe that the dragon god can really do anything to us. It's indeed terrifying enough. Little Star hurriedly retreated, unwilling to meet force with force. Long Qianchao, who was supported by the primordial Nirvana dragon formation, was incomparably terrifying. In this place, his strength had reached an extremely terrifying level. Even Little Star could not contend with him. Kill! Long Qianchao roared again and controlled the enormous golden dragon phantom to follow Little Star, wanting to take the opportunity to tear her to pieces. At the same time, the three sage experts of the dragons caught up and began to surround Little Star again. Long Qianchao's 4 strong claws were wide open, tearing open wounds in the void as he advanced rapidly. However, just as he was halfway through, his body suddenly shook and he cursed fiercely. Damn it! However, on its huge body, there were suddenly streaks of purple gold light that lit up one after another. These streaks of light were only as thick as an ordinary person's finger and released the divine power of thunder. Streaks of light shone and covered Long Qianchao's body like meandering meridians, making him look like he was covered by a large net of thunder. This scene was exactly the same as when Du Xiaofu summoned the thunder martial vein earlier. Damn it! Damn it! Long Qianchao cursed and stopped chasing Little Xingxing. Majestic energy circulated in his body, trying to suppress the power of the thunder. Needless to say, it was definitely caused by Du Xiaofu, who he had swallowed earlier. At this moment, he could only rely on his own strength to suppress it. If he borrowed the power of the primordial Nirvana dragon formation, he would probably be severely injured. However, with his strength, how could he compare to the current Du Xiaofu? Before long, the lightning on Long Qianchao's body surged and shot into the 9 heavens. With a series of muffled puff 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 sounds, its huge dragon body was directly torn apart, creating a terrifying gash as dragon blood madly gushed out. Amidst the ripples of lightning, a figure bathed in thunder charged out of the gash. It was Du Xiaofu. He gripped the purple gold heavenly tower tightly in his hand. His purple robes were stained with golden dragon blood and fluttered behind him, making him look like a terrifying Azura from hell. Long Qianchao retreated hurriedly, distancing himself from Du Xiaofu. At this moment, he had already returned to his human form. His clothes were tattered, and he looked extremely wretched. His head and hands, which were exposed outside of his robe, were covered with dense cracks, making him look like a broken but unbreakable porcelain. He looked like he had suffered extreme injuries. Father. On the other side, Little Xingxing was overjoyed to see that Du Xiaofu was unharmed. He finally relaxed and focused on fighting the 3 saint stage dragons. Long Qianchao, you're still far from being able to kill me, Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu's body was surrounded by lightning as he looked coldly at Long Qianchao. However, he did not take advantage of the other party's heavy injuries to kill him. His gaze was cast towards the talisman formation outside. How is this possible? The patriarch is heavily injured. At this moment, everyone outside the talisman formation was looking at this scene in shock. However, when Du Xiaofu's gaze shifted to the talisman formation, these people finally panicked. Oh no, this little thief still wants to break the talisman formation. Quickly send someone in. We can't let him succeed. An elder from the Dragon Clan said, and many other experts moved in response. However, it was already too late. Within the talisman formation, Du Xiaofu stepped into the air, and the Scarlet Horse Monkey's primordial spirit rushed out from between his brows again. The five-finger mountain appeared and expanded rapidly, instantly filling the entire talisman formation space. The majestic primordial spirit power surged and directly impacted the formation's runes outside the talisman formation. Hum! An ear-piercing buzzing sound pierced everyone's eardrums and lasted for a long time. The five-finger mountain continued to expand and penetrated the formation's runes bit by bit. Oh no, the talisman formation is about to break. Once he enters, the dragons won't be able to rest in peace. Let's block him first and quickly ask the patriarch to come out of seclusion, shouted a dragon's expert. As he gave the order, he led many experts to charge towards the talisman formation in an attempt to stop Du Xiaofu. Although Long Qianchao was heavily injured in the talisman formation, he would not watch Du Xiaofu break the formation and leave without doing anything. With a flip of his wrist, he took out the Dragon Abyss talisman. Then, under the circulation of a mysterious force, the primordial Nirvana dragon formation transformed into countless golden dragon phantoms and gathered towards him. Not long after, another huge dragon form condensed and carried a terrifying might as it pounced towards Du Xiaofu. The huge dragon opened its mouth and spat out a dragon's breath. The terrifying aura was vast and mighty, and the space was pierced through. However, this terrifying dragon's breath did not hit Du Xiaofu. This was because his body had suddenly disappeared from where he was standing. Chapter 25-24. Inside the talisman array, the golden light of the redbone horse monkey's essence soul retracted, and the phantom of the five-finger mountain also dissipated. Du Xiaofu's figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. The giant dragon phantom's attack missed. Only then did Long Qianchao react. He turned around in shock and saw that the purple-robed youth's figure had already gone outside the talisman array. Damn it! Long Qianchao cursed. He did not dare to hesitate any longer and also rushed out of the talisman array. The three Saint Stage Dragons who were still fighting with little Xingxing also stopped fighting and retreated. The three of them looked at each other. Now that the array was broken, Du Xiaofu had already entered the dragons, and it would probably cause great waves. For a moment, the three of them did not know whether to stay and continue to deal with little Xingxing or go out to fight Du Xiaofu together. Old thing, don't block the way. Just as they were hesitating, little Xingxing's cold shout sounded in their ears. The dragon's main body let out a roar that shook the void. A terrifying pressure spread, and the three Saint Stage experts were caught off guard. They suddenly felt their legs go weak and almost fell down. They circulated the power in their bodies and suppressed the trembling of their essence souls. Seeing little Xingxing charge over, the three of them hurriedly attacked and blocked together. In an instant, the four of them fought again. At this time, outside the talisman array, a group of dragons experts surrounded Du Xiaofu, who had barged into the clan. They were extremely nervous and ready for battle. Du Xiaofu, what do you want? A hale and hearty old man with a white beard faced Du Xiaofu and took a step forward to ask sternly. Du Xiaofu raised his eyelids and glanced at the old man indifferently. He did not say anything, but turned to look at the primordial Nirvana dragon array behind him. He used the redbone horse monkey's essence soul to break through all talisman arrays and escaped from it. However, Little Star was still inside, facing the joint attack of the three Sage Stage powerhouses. With little Xingxing's strength, even if he couldn't defeat his opponents, it would be more than enough for him to protect himself. Fortunately, the immemorial Nirvana Dragon Formation's energy had been greatly depleted during his continuous battles with Long Qianchao. Its might had been weakened by more than half. Otherwise, even if he possessed the redbone horse monkey primordial spirit, it would be very difficult for him to escape so quickly. Under such circumstances, There was no doubt that Little Star would win. It shouldn't take long for him to defeat the three of them. This made Du Xiaofu feel slightly relieved. Du Xiaofu, do you really think that we dragons are pushovers? Do you really think that you can do whatever you want here? Just as Du Xiaofu turned around, he saw the brilliance of the formation flash and a miserable figure leapt out. It was Long Qianchao. The injuries that were as dense as meridians were still on his body. Fine lines crisscrossed, making him look like he would shatter at any moment. His dragon eyes glared hatefully at Du Xiaofu. It was frightening. I'm not here to seek revenge. If there was a grudge, I would usually take it on the spot. Du Xiaofu snorted coldly. However, he didn't answer Long Qianchao. Instead, he continued the words of the old man from before with an expression that said it was only right. However, these words directly poked at the sore spot of the dragons. They were almost angered to death. The old man who had reprimanded Du Xiaofu earlier had his white beard curled up and was about to fly up. Everyone knew that Du Xiaofu and the dragons had always had a tense relationship. It was almost to the point where they wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. Many young elites of the dragons had died at his hands. Many experts of the older generation had also been killed by him. This kind of hatred could not be washed away even with all the water in the world. However, at the same time that these people felt hatred, they also felt deep regret and helplessness. They regretted provoking this demon king from the very beginning. They should not have underestimated him and formed a blood feud with him. However, now that they had fallen to such a state, there was no room for regret. They could only brace themselves and fight to the death. No matter why you've barged into my dragons today, we dragons do not welcome you. Long Qianchao gritted his teeth and said word by word, I admit that you are indeed powerful. However, you must know that this is not the outside world. This is the dragons. We will not tolerate your arrogance. Humph, Long Qianchao, who's the arrogant one here? To tell you the truth, if it weren't for the fact that you dragons still have some use and have some relationship with the dragon god, I wouldn't mind bringing people here to wipe you dragons from this world without leaving a single trace. Du Xiaofu snorted coldly. His aura was awe-inspiring. You must believe that the current me has the strength to do so. As soon as he said this, all the dragons felt a chill run down their spines. His words carried a terrifying and arrogant threat. However, most of the people present knew that this was not a threat to Du Xiaofu. Just as he had said, he really could do it. The current barren country had already become extremely powerful. They had dozens of Saint Realm experts. Furthermore, there were more and more people who were improving and could break through at any time. Disregarding the desolate country, Du Xiaofu also had a wide range of personal connections. The Golden-Winged Rock clan, the Fang clan, the Taoist clan, the Confucian clan, the School of Farmer, the Mahist clan, the Phoenix clan, the Yin-Yang clan, the Ancient Heavenly sect, the Mysterious Talisman sect. In addition, there were also the Human clan and the Beast Alliance in the ancient wilderness fearsome ground. If Du Xiaofu really wanted to exterminate the dragons, all he needed to do was call out and countless powerful people would respond and raise their armies to attack. It was true that the dragons were powerful, but it was impossible for them to fight against so many powerful forces alone. In the end, they would only be annihilated. It was only at this moment that Long Qianchao and the rest realized that Du Xiaofu's arrogance did have a basis. Everyone stared blankly at Du Xiaofu and did not say anything for a long time. After a long time, Long Qianchao slowly shook off his anger and shock. He naturally knew that the purpose of Du Xiaofu's trip was to subdue them so that they could work for him in the upcoming great calamity of the devil religion. Facing Du Xiaofu, Long Qianchao gritted his teeth and said, We dragons have been passed down from the primordial age and will never listen to you, Du Xiaofu. I advise you to give up on this idea while it's still early. The dragons had their own considerations and would not compromise so easily just because of Du Xiaofu's words, or because of that mutated dragon with the bloodline of the dragon god. Who do you think you are, Long Qianchao? Based on your position in the dragons, do you think you can make the decision? Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows when he heard that. Back in the Eternal Tomb, the dragons also had a powerful person who returned alive. Let him come out and talk. I know that the dragons have a deep foundation and should have some extremely powerful people in seclusion. Let them come out and talk. Chapter 25:25. Du Xiaofu. Long Qianqiao clenched his teeth so hard that his knuckles cracked. The contempt in Du Xiaofu's words made him furious. In any case, he was a pillar of support for the dragons. In the entire dragon clan, there weren't many existences that were higher than him. However, Du Xiaofu looked at him with contempt, his tone full of disdain. How could he not be angry? Just as Long Qianqiao was about to fight Du Xiaofu once more, a commotion broke out among the dragons, and they all looked behind them. An extremely burly old man walked over with large strides, followed by several powerful dragons. The old ancestor is here. It's Dragon Ninth Old Ancestor Gu. This is great. Let's see if this demon king still dares to be impudent in my dragon city. The appearance of the old man caused many dragons to become excited, and they began to discuss among themselves. Du Xiaofu looked up and saw the old man rushing over. Naturally, he had seen this old man before. It was the dragon's powerhouse who had walked out of the eternal tomb. After listening to the discussion among the dragons, he also found out that this old ancestor was called Dragon 9 Gu. Du Xiaofu, why have you come to my dragons? Dragon 9 stepped forward and questioned sternly without any greeting. When Du Xiaofu heard this, he immediately frowned. He originally had some respect for the old man. After all, the old man had made great contributions in suppressing the demon god in the primordial era. However, at this moment, Du Xiaofu's heart was burning with rage. As I said, I didn't come to the Nirvana Dragon Abyss to seek revenge. Du Xiaofu suppressed the anger in his heart and said seriously, "You are the ancestor of the dragons. You have lived since the primordial era until now. You have even suppressed the demon god in the eternal tomb for eons. Now that the great tribulation of heaven and earth is about to happen again, I'm sure you know how terrifying the demon god is. I'm afraid that the dragons won't be able to escape unscathed. Therefore, I hope that the dragons can face this matter head-on. I, Du Xiaofu, can let go of past grudges, and I hope that the dragons can do the same. Whether it's for the sake of all living beings in the world, or for the sake of the long-term survival of our respective races, to be able to unite with all living beings to deal with the demon god together." Du Xiaofu said a lot in one breath. These words were his true thoughts. The scenes he'd seen in the tomb of heaven and earth when he'd returned to the upper reaches of the river of time were still fresh in his mind. Mountains and rivers were shattered, rivers of blood flowed, and the people were plunged into misery and suffering. Those hellish scenes were too shocking. How many living beings had died in that great tribulation? His ancestor, as the heavenly Tao of a world, had also fallen in that battle. As for the dragons, the wounds they'd suffered had yet to fully heal to this day. Du Xiaofu, how many of our dragons have you killed? You still want us to work with you? Dream on. Before Dragon 9 could speak, Long Qianqiao jumped out again and shouted loudly. His furious demeanor had completely lost the demeanor that a Saint Realm expert should have. Dragon 9 was also secretly displeased by this. He waved a hand and stopped Long Qianqiao from continuing. He turned to Du Xiaofu. I was part of the primordial era's calamity and naturally know of its devastation. In the great tribulation of dragons and phoenixes instigated by the demon god, our dragons suffered even greater losses and lost countless disciples. Our overall strength was reduced to less than 100%. Later on, the power of heaven and earth was suppressed, and no one could break through to the sage realm anymore. Therefore, it's precisely because of this that the dragon's current situation is probably no longer able to deal with the demon god. Therefore, please go back. However, I can promise you on behalf of all the dragons that during the demon god's calamity, all the dragons will hide from the world and will not cause any trouble for you because of past grudges. Haha, hide from the world and not come out? Du Xiaofu suddenly laughed coldly. I know that the dragons must have their own methods and independent space. Perhaps they can escape from the impending great tribulation and avoid losses. Or perhaps, now that the suppression of the power of heaven and earth has been removed, You should have already contacted the dragons of other worlds and received a certain amount of help. Indeed, you can protect yourselves without worry. However, I want to ask, can you really get the consent of the dragons of other worlds to do this? As Du Xiaofu spoke, he looked back at the primordial nirvana dragon formation behind him again. At this time, the battle between little Xingxing and the three sage dragons was nearing its end. With the power of the talisman array greatly reduced, little Xingxing's strength directly suppressed the three of them. After taking a glance, Du Xiaofu turned back and continued to speak to Dragon 9. The daughter of the dragon god has come here personally. As a branch of the dragons of the outside world, what reason do you have to not listen to orders? As he spoke, a strong domineering aura slowly brewed from Du Xiaofu's body. His last sentence was laced with a hint of threat. It was impossible for the dragons to play it safe. It was not that he wanted to drag them down, but he simply could not trust the character of these people, not to mention that they might stab him in the back during the battle. If the demon god and the devil religion were too rampant, the flames of war would eventually spread to the dragons. In their deranged state, these people might even collude with the demon god and take the opportunity to get rid of him. Du Xiaofu would never allow such an unstable factor to exist, because this was completely related to the safety of himself and his many friends and family. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, Dragon 9's old eyes burned as he looked at little Xingxing in the talisman array and said, I know that she is the daughter of the dragon god, but for the survival of the dragons of this world, forgive me for not listening to your orders and fighting the devil religion. We dragons have sacrificed enough in the primordial war. While Dragon 9 was speaking, the battle in the talisman array had already ended. The three sages were all beaten down and lost the ability to fight again. The bloodline of the dragons and the vermilion bird flowed in her body. It was incomparably powerful and was not something that ordinary sages could contend against. The talisman array, whose power had been greatly reduced, could no longer trap her. The strange dragon's body stretched out horizontally, emitting a monstrous might. Her wings flapped with terrifying power and shattered the talisman array. Amidst the rumbling, her original body flew out and arrived behind Du Xiaofu, transforming into her human form. Old thing, do you mean that you won't accept the orders of the main clan in the outside world? As soon as little Xingxing landed, she cursed. If you mean what you say and can completely represent the wishes of all the dragons, then I can also guarantee you that even if you can safely survive the great calamity, as long as I am still alive at that time, I will definitely get the main clan to come and wipe out all of you scum. Chapter 25-26. Translator. H2DH2 Mr. If Du Xiaofu's attitude was arrogant, then Little Star's words were extremely intimidating to all the dragons. If Du Xiaofu really brought people to attack the dragons, they would definitely fight to the death. However, if the dragons from the outside world were to come, they would not even have the courage to resist and could only wait to be dealt with. Everyone from the dragons trembled when they heard Little Star's words. Their expressions instantly turned ugly. Dragon 9 was at a loss for words and did not know how to answer. They all knew that the purest azure dragon bloodline flowed in Little Star's body and that she was the dragon god's daughter. Therefore, her words could be said to represent the wishes of the Azure Dragon clan. The dragons in this world were only one of the insignificant branches of the Azure Dragon clan. If they disobeyed little Xingxing's wishes, they might not be completely annihilated by the main clan, but the punishment they would face would definitely be like purgatory. Perhaps it would be even more terrifying than death. In other words, it seemed that the dragons had no other choice but to submit and compromise. Dragon 9's face was ashen as he clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. His voice was gloomy as he said, "Don't force me." Force you? Du Xiaofu's eyebrows shot up. He could sense the anger and unwillingness in Dragon 9's words. But no matter how unwilling he was not worthy of his sympathy. Du Xiaofu said coldly, "Now, do you still have a way out? Unless you really intend to collude with the devil religion. Otherwise, who gave you the courage to say such words?" Du Xiaofu, don't go too far. Dragon 9's face suddenly turned sinister as he shouted, "We dragons will never change our minds just because of the purple dragon emperor. The daughter of the dragon god is just a rumor. Who knows if it's true or not? There's no way a dragon would listen to an unknown person. Hee hee. The dragon god's daughter is just a rumor, and her origins are unknown? How laughable. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but laugh at Dragon Nine's words. How could he not understand Dragon Nine's intentions? The dragon race was planning to shamelessly refuse to acknowledge little Xingxing's identity and pretend to be confused. With such an excuse, he could indeed ignore little Xingxing's orders. Even if they were to face the Azure Dragon clan's reprimand in the future, they would have a certain excuse to avoid excessive punishment. One had to admit that this Dragon Nine had lived for countless years. He was really a scheming old fox. With extreme disdain and sneering, Du Xiaofu continued, "You can even say such self-deceiving and self-deceiving words. To be honest, even I feel embarrassed for you. I just want to ask, do you still have any shame?" You. The dragons glared at Du Xiaofu angrily, wishing they could tear him into pieces with their gazes. Even the identity of the purple dragon emperor can't suppress you. Looks like the dragons are still stubborn and don't even care about the main dragons. You're determined to go against us. Du Xiaofu curled his lips and shook his head to express his disappointment. He was already mentally prepared and knew that the dragon's trip this time would not convince them easily. However, he didn't expect this group of people to be so shameless. Even the identity of the Azure Dragon clan and little Xingxing couldn't suppress them. "If you continue to be so aggressive, we dragons will fight to the death with you," Long Jiugu said with a cold expression on his face. "Fight to the death?" Du Xiaofu sneered and swept his gaze across the dragons. "With the current strength of the dragons, what right do you have to talk to me about fighting to the death? With a group of losers like you? Du Xiaofu, we dragons have long been irreconcilable with you. Today, you trespassed into the Nirvana Dragon Abyss, destroyed our clan's ancient talisman array, and humiliated us again and again. We dragons swear to fight to the death with you." Long Qianchao could no longer control his furious emotions. He jumped out and pointed at Du Xiaofu's nose as he shouted. As he spoke, his body bloomed with a light like the sun. A monstrous aura erupted, and an invisible force crushed toward Du Xiaofu and little Xingxing. At the same time, other than Dragon 9, the other dragons also joined Long Qianchao and released a powerful aura. "A bunch of stubborn old things." Du Xiaofu snorted. His body emitted a purple gold light, and the thunder martial vein covered his body. The power of thunder and lightning surged out. In an instant, an extremely powerful aura swept through the entire area. It was as if a god had descended to earth, pressing down on many dragons until they couldn't breathe. Du Xiaofu looked at Dragon 9, who didn't move. He was the strongest dragons here. The purple-robed young man said calmly, "If you weren't afraid, why would you say so much to me? Your ultimate goal should be to shed all pretenses of cordiality with me and kill the two of us. This way, even if the Azure Dragon clan investigates in the future, you'll have enough excuses, right?" Dragon 9's gaze trembled slightly, and he didn't speak for a long time. It was as if Du Xiaofu's words had completely exposed his thoughts. After a long time, Dragon 9 gathered his thoughts and looked at Du Xiaofu with his old eyes. "Du Xiaofu, I'll say it again. You must know that this is the dragons, not the outside world. It's not a place where you can act wildly. Since we've already spoken, this old man won't beat around the bush. You two juniors have no right to be arrogant here." This time, Dragon 9's tone was unusually calm. Only when he had made up his mind would he be able to remain so calm and collected. This change naturally couldn't escape Du Xiaofu's perception. He knew that the dragons were planning to attack and kill him and little Xingxing here. Needless to say, it must be as he expected. The dragons must have many trump cards that they hadn't revealed yet. If a few more powerhouses like Dragon 9 came, it would indeed be very difficult for the two of them to win. With this in mind, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but turn back and look in the direction of the primordial Nirvana Dragon formation. Yi Piaoling, Qingguyu, and the other 18 heavenly guards should be arriving soon. As long as they arrived, even if a few more old monsters emerged from the dragons, they would still have the power to fight. Seeing that Du Xiaofu didn't respond, Dragon 9 spoke again indifferently. "Since you've already said so much, There's no need for you to leave today. Little Xingxing took a step forward, and the mark on his forehead glowed with an extremely demonic light. He stared intently at Dragon 9 and snorted. I really don't know where you get your confidence from, old thing. Father, why bother wasting time with them? These people are very stubborn. It looks like they really won't give in so easily. Du Xiaofu nodded, and the corners of his mouth curled up. He said to Dragon 9, It's fine if you don't want to submit, but I'll beat you until you do. Chapter 25-27. As they spoke, Du Xiaofu, Little Xingxing, Dragon 9, Long Qianxiao, and the others all made their moves. Since they had already shed all pretenses of cordiality, and even the most unpleasant words had already been said, there was no longer any room for negotiation. To the dragons, only by killing Du Xiaofu and Little Xingxing could they obtain the final peace. As for Du Xiaofu, he had to use his fists to reason with the other party and teach them how to be human. Screech. With a sharp cry, the rock's cry resounded throughout the 4 seas. Golden light enveloped Du Xiaofu's entire body, as dazzling as the scorching sun. Then, unparalleled bolts of lightning charged out from the golden light. Rumbling sounds of explosions rang out incessantly, carrying with them a terrifying murderous aura that swept across the vast and mighty area. Du Xiaofu charged forward, pouncing towards Dragon 9. The aura of the gods and demons rolled out, his aura boiling, as terrifying as the creation of the heavens and earth. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying battle broke out between the two of them as they clashed. At the same time, Little Xingxing let out a high-pitched dragon roar from her throat and transformed into her dragon form. An endless dragon's might, accompanied by torrential flames, instantly filled the surrounding space. This caused all the powerful individuals from the dragon tribe to feel their hearts palpitating. Just the natural pressure of this supreme bloodline directly weakened their combat power to a certain extent. Shameless old things, you don't even care about my father and the Green Dragon clan. I really don't know who gave you the guts. Little Xingxing let out a soft cry. The father she was referring to was naturally her biological father, the dragon god. Little Xingxing said domineeringly, The people of the dragons are all proud and unyielding. People like you who are scared out of your wits by the demon god and only want to stay out of this matter are not worthy of being a branch of the dragons. Since that's the case, I'll clean up the family today, break your dragon bones, and release your dragon blood, because you don't deserve to have these things. As she spoke, Little Xingxing's wings suddenly flapped as she charged towards Long Qianxiao. A vibrant vermilion bird projection appeared, and a rainbow divine light engulfed the entire space. Little Xingxing displayed his most terrifying technique. It was as if he could affect space-time. It was as if he had crossed space-time to come here, causing the space to riot. He could crush space-time, and that monstrous 7-colored flame burned the void. Long Qianxiao's eyes trembled fiercely, and even his spirit couldn't help but tremble. Behind him, the other dragons were the same. The fear in their hearts made them want to prostrate themselves before Little Star. The might of the 7-colored vermilion bird fused with the might of the dragon, causing their hearts to tremble. Follow me. Let's kill this little thing first. Long Qianxiao suppressed the fear in his heart and shouted to the people behind him. Then, they transformed into the true form of dragons. Roar! Dragon roars rang out. In the next instant, the sea of clouds in the void rolled. Raging flames filled the air. The entire void seemed to have been crushed. Long Qianxiao squeezed the void as he expanded. An incomparably huge dragon of immeasurable length appeared, its claws able to tear the void apart. When the dragon appeared, its entire body was covered in raging flames. The flames covered its dragon scales, but it gave off a feeling of being as tough as steel. On its ferocious head, the dragon's eyes were like red black holes, as if they could swallow the world. At the same time, the other dragons attacked at the same time. Dozens of giant dragons stretched across the void. Although their auras were not as powerful as Long Qianxiao's, all of them had the cultivation of the sage stage. Many of them joined forces, and all of them were targeting Little Xingxing alone. Kill! Little Xingxing shouted. There was no fear in his dragon eyes. As he spread his wings, an unparalleled murderous aura swept up. Like a tiger in a flock of sheep, he charged into the many dragons. Boom, 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 boom. On the other side, the battle between Du Xiaofu and Dragon 9 was also in progress. Endless power swept across the void, and deafening collisions shook the void. Seven-colored light, lightning, and endless golden light bloomed everywhere. Countless talismans and mystic runes were shattered and annihilated, filling the air with whistling sounds. The sea churned, the ground cracked, and the void shattered. Terrifying energy wreaked havoc, shattering everything as if it was the end of the world. Not far away, the primordial Nirvana dragon formation had already been repeatedly destroyed by Du Xiaofu and Little Xingxing. At this time, it was affected by the aftermath of the battle and directly shattered. If they wanted to rebuild it, they would need an incalculable amount of resources. Old thing, you're no match for me now. During the battle, Du Xiaofu used the ultimate meaning of lightning. Lightning fell from the sky. Bolts of lightning as thick as mountains fell from the 9 heavens, turning the Nirvana dragon abyss into a sea of lightning. Dragon 9's old and tall body bobbed up and down in the sea of lightning. Although this powerhouse who had walked out of the eternal tomb was extremely powerful, he seemed to be a little tired at this time. One had to know that not long ago in the ancient wilderness continent, Du Xiaofu had killed Patriarch Zhangjia of the Gulan Heavenly Eagle race, Patriarch Feng San of the distant Sky Flame Phoenix race, and the Yu family's patriarch. These people's cultivation levels were not much lower than Dragon 9's. Moreover, Du Xiaofu was still comprehending the inheritance left behind by his ancestors in the sacred palace, and his strength had improved by leaps and bounds. Therefore, although he could not completely defeat Dragon 9, he was completely suppressing him and had the absolute upper hand. Du Xiaofu, it won't be that easy for you to kill me. Dragon 9's main body, which was transformed from dragons, opened its mouth and spat out a bright beam of light, shattering the lightning in front of it. At the same time, it said, "You can't kill me, and I can't do anything to you. But that little girl is different. Just wait to collect her corpse." Dragon 9 waved its powerful dragon claws and fought fiercely with Du Xiaofu. His goal was very simple. He did not seek to defeat his opponent, but to delay him and create an opportunity for Long Qianchao and the others to kill the Purple Dragon Emperor. When the time came, many dragons would swarm him, and no matter how many tricks Du Xiaofu had, he would not be able to escape death. You want to kill me? Don't you know if these insects have the strength to do so? On the other side, Little Xingxing also heard Dragon 9's words and could not help but snort coldly. Her situation was not very optimistic. More than 10 sage dragons surrounded her, and it was indeed difficult for her to fight back. However, she did not show signs of defeat, as Dragon 9 had said. Du Xiaofu knew that with Little Xingxing's strength, it would be harder for those people to kill her than to reach the heavens. Not to mention, she still had some hidden tricks that she had not used yet. Kill. As long as we kill this little thing, Du Xiaofu will also not be able to escape today. Long Qianchao roared, and his dragon roar spread everywhere, leading many dragons to attack with all their might. Old thing, summon your dragon's trump card. Otherwise, you won't have a chance to fight back today. During the battle, Du Xiaofu's mind was also spread out, and he could not help but smile when he sensed the movements outside. Chapter 25-28. As Du Xiaofu's voice fell, Dragon 9 also felt that something was wrong. Looking up, he saw a majestic aura surging in the broken talisman array. Then, he saw a group of figures walking on the waves. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. 18 figures in a row, each with a valiant aura and a cold, murderous aura, passed through the immemorial Nirvana dragon formation. The 18 celestial generals. Many of the dragon's experts narrowed their eyes. Many of them had experienced the valiant stance of these 18 people before. Moreover, the 18 celestial generals had made a name for themselves in the outside world. These 18 people were like 18 death gods, who in the Sanlu Kyushu had not heard of the 18 celestial generals. With their help, It was no wonder that Du Xiaofu dared to say such arrogant words in front of the dragons. Kill. As soon as the 18 celestial generals arrived, Yi Piaoling, who was in the lead, suddenly shouted coldly. When Qingguyu, Stone, Ing Yin, Yin Tianjue, and the others heard this, they did not say a word and directly pounced on the dragon's experts who were besieging little Xingxing. Cold, murderous aura rippled from each of the figures. Their cultivation was all above the saint realm. Most importantly, there was absolute tacit understanding between the 18 of them. They had gained experience in life and death battles, and their cooperation was flawless. Oh no! A dragon's expert shouted. Ah! Fierce collisions unfolded, and miserable cries rang out. Some people were seriously injured in the first exchange, vomiting blood and retreating. Don't be too heavy-handed. Keep them alive. There's still a great use for them. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly as he said casually. Just as he had said earlier, he did not come to the dragons to kill. It was to tame them. Whether they were willing or not, they had to submit to little Xingxing. It was not up to them. Therefore, keeping them alive was more valuable than killing them. Thief, you've gone too far. Dragon Nine's claws, which looked like they could blot out the blue sky, came crashing down and knocked Du Xiaofu back slightly. The ferocity of the 18 celestial guards shocked him to the core. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before all of the dragon's Saint Realm experts were wiped out and lost their ability to fight. After that, Long Jiugu's dragon head, which was full of scales and hair, roared toward the depths of the dragon clan. Long Huang, Long Yu, the dragon clan is in danger. If you don't show up now, when will you? These words caused Du Xiaofu to involuntarily look in that direction. As Long Jiugu's words left his mouth, a rosy mist suddenly rose up from the area where Long Jiugu was. The thick fog was like a dark cloud that kept rolling, carrying with it an aura that could topple mountains and overturn seas. At the same time, rays of golden light bloomed in the rolling dark clouds, piercing through the fog and penetrating it. There really is an old monster in seclusion, Du Xiaofu thought to himself. When this scene appeared, he already understood in his heart that the true foundation of the dragon clan was about to be revealed. Sure enough, a dragon's roar resounded, and a loud and clear sound wave instantly spread out in the field. This sound wave was all-pervasive and attacked one's soul. The 18 celestial guards, led by Yi Piaoling, were instantly forced back, their faces pale. Even with Du Xiaofu's cultivation, he felt his ears go numb. Many of the dragon's experts stopped fighting and wanted to prostrate, but at the same time, they were excited from the bottom of their hearts. An old mixed-blood dragon dares to be impudent in front of me. Little Xingxing was not affected at all. Instead, while everyone was retreating, the dragon's main body stretched out horizontally. Instead of retreating, it charged towards the depths of the dragons. Roar! Little Xingxing roared, but the sound wave did not seem too loud and clear. Compared to the dragon roar just now, it even seemed a little immature. However, such a roar caused the surrounding dragons and all the saints to finally collapse to the ground at the same time. Young man, all of you should retreat. We dragons have our own rules of conduct. Why do you have to force us step by step? An aged voice could be heard. Immediately after, they saw the golden light break through the barrier of the thick fog, but as soon as it became bigger and brighter, it slowly converged. Then, a simple and thin old dragon slowly flew out of the fog. On its body, the dragon horns were shriveled, the dragon whiskers were sparse, and the dragon scales were dim. When it opened its mouth, the dragon teeth were peeled off and missing, and it looked like it was about to die. However, it was such an old dragon. After it appeared, it waved its hand, and in an instant, wind and thunder rolled up in the sky and swept towards little Xingxing. A seemingly gentle force struck out, but when it landed on little Xingxing's body, it carried a powerful force that was difficult to resist. Little Xingxing's strange dragon body was slowly repelled. Even if it used all its strength, it could not resist at all. What a terrifying expert! Du Xiaofu could not help but tremble. This old dragon, who looked like it had one foot in the grave, was definitely not as weak as it looked on the surface. Instead, It had extremely terrifying strength. Greetings, Patriarch Long Huang. After the old dragon appeared, the group of dragons led by Long Qinchao all knelt on the ground and shouted in unison, saluting the old dragon. Young man, if you are willing to leave now, the grudge between you and us dragons will be written off, and we will not owe each other anything. We dragons will not interfere in your battle with the demon god. At the same time, you will not interfere in the affairs of us dragons. Okay. A faint light flashed all over the old dragon's body, and it turned into a human form. It was a stooped little old man. There was no luster in his turbid old eyes, and his hair and small dragon whiskers were sparse and snow-white. There was no domineering tone in his words. Instead, there was a hint of negotiation. Du Xiaofu's murderous aura immediately retracted a little in the face of this old dragon, who did not rely on his cultivation to be overbearing. However, before he could say anything, another voice rang out. No, we must not let them leave. This voice also came from the thick fog. Everyone looked up and saw a figure rushing out from there. Golden light spread out and filled the air, piercing everyone's eyes. Everyone subconsciously raised their hands to shield their eyes. When the light faded, everyone saw a tall and burly old man standing in the middle of the field. This old man had a strong body and a ruddy face. His eyes were blooming with divine light, and his eyebrows carried a strong, murderous aura. Seeing this old man, the dragons knelt on the ground again and called out to their patriarch. Du Xiaofu also knew from their greetings that this old man was called Long Yu. May I know who the two of you are? Can your words represent the dragons? Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows and asked. He could feel that Long Huang and Long Yu's strength was incomparably terrifying. They were probably much stronger than the Yu family's patriarch. Since that was the case, there was no need to say more about their status in the dragons. However, Du Xiaofu wanted to test whether the dragons still had more hidden experts who had not appeared. As expected, when he heard Du Xiaofu's words, Long Qinchao's expression suddenly changed and he jumped out. He transformed into his human form, stretched out his hand, pointed at Du Xiaofu's nose, and cursed, Du Xiaofu, you are too arrogant. These are the two patriarchs of my clan who have lived for countless years. Their status in the dragons is supreme. How can a brat like you question them? In response, Du Xiaofu only glanced at him indifferently and then smiled lightly. Long Qinchao's words allowed Du Xiaofu to have an idea in his heart. Presumably, these two people were already the strongest experts hidden in the dragons. Haha, since I've come, there's no reason for me to retreat. Du Xiaofu looked at the old man called Long Huang and smiled. Earlier, this old dragon's attitude had made him have a slightly good impression. Little bastard, do you think you can still leave? Long Huang hadn't spoken when Long Yu's brows rose, and he once again took over Du Xiaofu's words. How many disciples of my clan have you killed? Today, you even trespassed into my Nirvana Dragon Abyss. How can I let you leave so easily? Why don't you just leave your life here? Coldness instantly brewed in Du Xiaofu's eyes when he heard this. Looks like today's matter still can't be settled peacefully, Du Xiaofu said coldly. Long Yu's attitude was different from Long Huang's. This old man didn't intend to let things go. Since that was the case, Du Xiaofu didn't want to say anything more to them. 18 celestial generals. Du Xiaofu suddenly shouted. Yes. Yi Piaoling, Qinggu Yu, Stone, and the rest of the 18 responded in unison. I'll leave those mixed blood dragons to you. Beat them up for me, but don't kill them. Du Xiaofu ordered coldly, Little Star, go install Dragon 9. Let me teach the other two a lesson. Little bastard, you want to deal with the two of us at the same time by yourself? Don't you think you're too arrogant? Long Yu's eyes widened like copper bells, showing extreme contempt and disdain. His and Long Huang's strength was definitely at the peak of this world. In this world, there might be a few people stronger than them, but they were definitely not people the young man in front of him could compare to. Old thing, do you like to scold people that much? Since your mouth is so cheap, I'll teach you how to speak properly. Long Yu kept calling him a little bastard, causing Du Xiaofu's killing intent to explode. Even though these two old fellows were exceptionally powerful, even more powerful than Patriarch Zhangjia, Patriarch Fengsan, and the Yu clan's old emperor, they were still able to defeat Patriarch Zhangjia, Patriarch Fengsan, and Patriarch Fengsan. However, the current Du Xiaofu had already improved greatly. How could he be afraid of them? Furthermore, he had never been someone who was afraid of trouble. Du Xiaofu summoned the purple gold heavenly fault and held it in his hand. His body suddenly emitted a bright golden light, making him look as dazzling as the sun. Amidst the dazzling light, a pair of purple gold wings took shape behind him. Immediately after, Du Xiaofu's body soared into the sky, standing high up in the sky. Old mixed blood dragon, take my sword. Holy sword roar. Du Xiaofu shouted, raising his sword with both hands. The purple gold heavenly fault let out a sharp whistle, bringing with it a terrifying aura. Endless energy gathered on it, condensing into a terrifying sword light, slashing down at Long Yu's head. You're courting death. As Long Yu shouted, he moved. His huge body appeared. His horns were lofty, his scales and claws were awe-inspiring, and he was about to pounce. A dragon's roar burst forth, causing the void to tremble endlessly. Following that, a dragon's mouth swallowed the sky and spat out a cloud at Du Xiaofu. Sigh, why do you have to do this? When the old dragon named Long Huang saw this, he sighed and staggered forward. I didn't want to be your enemy, but you didn't want to leave. If that's the case, I really can't keep you. The old dragon did not transform into his original body. Stepping on the void, he seemed to be walking slowly towards Du Xiaofu. But in reality, his speed was incomparably fast. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived beside Du Xiaofu. Old thing, watch as I beat you up. Seeing that the other side had already begun to fight, little Xingxing's original body also flew over and pounced towards Dragon 9. Kill. Yi Piaoling's low and concise voice rang out, and the 18 heavenly guards moved with it. Everyone held their weapons, erupting with a terrifying aura as they charged towards Long Qianchao and the others. In an instant, a terrifying battle broke out. Destructive energy descended like a tsunami, sweeping away everything in its path and swallowing everything in this space. Strong light surged, and sharp whistles rumbled. Everything was shattered and annihilated, turning into fine powder, boiling up and down in the space. Many of the dragons who were not strong enough had already hidden far away. With their cultivation base, in this situation, they would be injured and die if they touched anything. There was no way for them to escape by luck. Demon King Du Xiaofu came with an arrogant aura, causing the dragons to use all their trump cards. After a few rounds of fighting, a battle that was destined to have a far-reaching impact could not be avoided in the end. Everyone was trembling with fear as they watched this unprecedented battle. The main focus was naturally the battle between the Patriarch, who had been in seclusion for countless years, and the Demon King Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu's sword slashed down, and heaven and earth were overshadowed by that resplendent sword light. As the purple gold heavenly tower slashed down, a vast amount of energy gathered and formed a sky-piercing sword light that crushed everything. Soaring dragon seizes the sun. In the face of Du Xiaofu's attack, this shout came from Long Yu's original body. The immeasurable dragon body swept through the void at extreme speed, and the space was directly crushed by the pressure. The dragon opened its mouth wide and rosy clouds rose. It bit down on Du Xiaofu like a divine dragon, trying to snatch a pearl. Open for me. The purple gold heavenly tower let out an earth-shattering sound, as if the gods were roaring. The Demon King was roaring, and it was breathtaking. The sword light finally slashed down, slashing on Long Yu's huge head. Boom, boom, boom. The two powerful forces collided, and a terrifying storm that could annihilate everything erupted. Dense talisman runes swirled and danced in the air, forcing Long Yu to retreat dozens of feet. At the same time, Du Xiaofu also suffered a great impact, and his body retreated hundreds of feet. One collision was enough to determine the winner. Obviously, in terms of raw strength, Du Xiaofu still had a certain gap between him and this old monster, at least 30% stronger than Yu Duanqing. Du Xiaofu secretly estimated. However, he was not afraid. He could even kill Yu Duanqing. Although it was a little difficult to deal with this old thing, it was also not something that was insurmountable. Du Xiaofu's emotions were fluctuating. Before he could adjust his posture and prepare for the next attack, he saw that stooped old dragon had already arrived in front of him. "Young man, why bother?" Long Huang raised a palm without the slightest fluctuation of aura and slowly and indifferently slapped towards Du Xiaofu's chest. "Since you insist on becoming enemies with us dragons, then I can only keep you here." This palm was the same as this old man's appearance, incomparably simple. Regardless of whether it was in terms of speed or momentum, it was like it was released by an ordinary person without cultivation. However, Du Xiaofu knew that this old dragon spoke politely, but when he attacked, it was incomparably fierce and did not have the slightest bit of ambiguity. In his heart, he did not dare to underestimate it in the slightest. Rippling, carefree steps. Without any thought, Du Xiaofu's feet moved. Strange footwork unfolded, and the light of thunder coiled around his feet, causing his figure to instantly become strange and ethereal. Just as Long Huang's palm was about to hit Du Xiaofu's chest, at the critical moment, his body twisted, and he calmly and dangerously dodged it. At the same time, Long Huang's palm struck the void. Wang, a dizzying, buzzing sound rang out, capable of affecting one's soul. At the place where the old dragon's palm landed, a palm-shaped black hole silently appeared in the air. After a long time, it still did not dissipate, as if it was branded. "You do have some ability." The old dragon retracted his palm and muttered. Following that, he unfolded his body and charged towards Du Xiaofu. At the same time, Long Yu did not stop either. Together with Long Yu, they surrounded and attacked the purple-robed youth. No wonder it can be used as the foundation of the dragons. It's really strong to the point of being abnormal, Du Xiaofu muttered to himself. Before coming to the dragons, he had already expected that this trip would not be smooth sailing. It was also because of this that he allowed the 18 heavenly generals to accompany him. At this moment, facing these two old monsters, even with Du Xiaofu's current strength, he did not dare to let his guard down. "I'll go all out. I don't believe that I can't take care of these two old things." Du Xiaofu gritted his teeth and put away the purple-gold heavenly fault. Between his hands, he began to move according to a strange trajectory. One after another, complicated and profound hand seals rapidly condensed in his palms, cryptic and profound. In next to no time, a strange pressure rose rapidly and filled every inch of space, causing everyone to feel their souls tremble. Even the two powerhouses, Long Huang and Long Yu, unconsciously paused for a moment. This caused the two supreme experts of the dragons to feel incredulous. The two of them realized that the purple-robed youth's next move was absolutely terrifying. "What's the use of having so many tricks? You're still too inexperienced in the end." Long Huang spoke with a calm and composed voice. His stooped old body suddenly straightened up, and his pair of muddy old eyes also blossomed with a sharp and absolute light. An invisible aura rose from his body, and as he waved his withered palm, there was an indescribable charm. It was an indescribable feeling. It was as though the world was dyed with a special rhythm along with Long Huang's actions, fluctuating with a mysterious rhythm. His every move carried the charm of the great Tao. Du Xiaofu was moved by this scene as well. At this moment, he only felt that the law imprint engraved on his essence spirit was trembling as well. Others might find it difficult to understand, but Du Xiaofu knew that this situation might have already transcended the level of profoundness. Long Huang's cultivation had already reached an extremely terrifying realm. In fact, he was not far from the true heavenly saint realm. The old man waved his hand and moved. It was still a light palm that pressed straight towards Du Xiaofu. However, this seemingly peaceful and harmless attack gave people a feeling that it was impossible to dodge. Heavenly Saint Realm? I'm afraid he's still far from it. Du Xiaofu composed himself and flipped his hands repeatedly, forming seals. An incomparably massive 8 trigrams diagram condensed above his head. The awe-inspiring pressure was mighty and pervasive. Layers of thunderclouds gathered and appeared above the void 8 trigrams. Heaven above and earth below. Heavenly thunder, absolute destruction. Du Xiaofu hollered. Beneath the 8 trigrams diagram, heavenly thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. Resplendent runes interweaved into a gigantic lightning net that traversed the universe and swept down towards Long Huang and Long Yu with an extreme yang aura. "Break," Long Huang said faintly. His palm, which had no aura fluctuations, was imprinted on the boundless lightning net. At the same time, the colossal dragon body that Long Yu transformed into also twisted upwards, pressing the void until it rumbled. His dragon body twisted and rolled, plunging headlong into the boundless energy frenzy. Bang, bang, bang. A deafening roar reverberated through the area. The giant thunderbolt net was destroyed by Long Huang's handprint in just a single exchange. Right on the heels of that, Long Yu's dragon tail swept and swung down towards Du Xiaofu's head. The tyrannical force howled, bringing along the sound of howling wind, cleaving out a 100-mile-long rift in space. How could Du Xiaofu dare to receive such a blow head-on? Without even thinking, he drifted backwards. During this process, the hand seals in Du Xiaofu's hands were still condensing continuously. Invisible power rippled. With him as the center, the 8 trigrams diagram in the void continued to spread out. The 8 trigrams diagram was evolving, changing, deriving, upper Kuan and lower Li, earthly fire bright destruction. As Du Xiaofu's hand seals changed rapidly, billowing flames spurted out from the void under his feet. It was like a sea of fire rising, intertwining, entangling and fusing with the shattered thunderbolts from before, converging into an even more powerful attack. At the same time this attack took shape, Long Yu's dragon tail also smashed down. Chi, chi, chi. Two terrifying forces suddenly collided, engulfing and grinding each other out. The sea of lightning and fire was smashed into smithereens. Du Xiaofu turned around and retreated again, avoiding the energy storm that filled the sky. At this time, the gigantic lightning net and boundless sea of fire that he painstakingly condensed were already destroyed. Above his head, only a lonely 8 trigrams diagram in the void was left, still flickering with light. Again, an unyielding fighting spirit also welled up in Du Xiaofu's heart. Long Huang and Long Yu could be said to be the top experts in this world. They were about the same as Huolei Laozu, whose strength had been reduced. Other than the demon god, there was also the eastern deity, western demon, southern Ru, and northern addict. Only Fui Bai, Crazy Ol, and a few others were their match. Such powerful opponents were hard to find. Therefore, Du Xiaofu's heart was also filled with an unyielding spirit. Otherwise, he might as well borrow the hands of these two supreme experts to temper himself. Chapter 25-29. The Void 8 trigrams was one of Du Xiaofu's strongest techniques. However, at this moment, he was facing two of the most powerful beings of the dragon tribe by himself. He was at an absolute disadvantage. The giant lightning net and endless sea of fire that he had painstakingly created were easily destroyed by the two of them. However, under such circumstances, he became stubborn and wanted to use the two of them to train himself. If Long Huang and Long Yu knew what Du Xiaofu was thinking, they would feel indescribably shocked and exasperated at the same time. The purple-robed young man in front of them was indeed different from ordinary people. Under the siege of two powerful experts, he did not think about how to save his life, but still wanted to train himself. No wonder he could achieve what he had today at such a young age. It was definitely not a coincidence. Of course, Long Huang and Long Yu did not know this. Their actions did not stop as they charged towards Du Xiaofu again, wanting to take him down. "Young man, you shouldn't have come to my dragons," Long Huang continued to mumble to himself. His body was no longer hunched and showed a sense of straightness. His pair of old hands moved in the void according to a strange trajectory. Following his movements, the entire space seemed to be dyed with an inexplicable charm. "Old thing, stop pretending to be a good person. Since you want to kill me, then do it. Why do you have to make it sound so dignified and helpless? You even did something like attacking me together and still put on an act. I don't see your old face blushing at all," Du Xiaofu said with a cold smile. How could he not understand at this point? This Long Huang had been chattering nonstop and putting on an act, as if he was forced to deal with him. However, when he attacked, he was very tough and did not have the slightest bit of mercy. Even he himself was fooled by his style. He still thought that he was a kind and good person. To think that Du Xiaofu had a good impression of this old dragon from the start. Thinking of this in his mind, Du Xiaofu's mind moved slightly, and his body was covered with a layer of hazy brilliance. The cyan spirit armor was summoned, with a biting cold and tough aura. Facing these two old monsters, he had no choice but to be cautious. Haha, young man, you're too naive. Then let me show you what is called absolute power. Long Huang chuckled and his hands never stopped moving. A powerful pressure gradually rose in this space, pressing down on every corner, making people feel extremely suffocated. Even breathing slowly became difficult. In the distance, the movements of Little Xingxing, Dragon 9, Long Qianchao, Yi Piaoling, and the others who were fighting became a lot slower, as if they were under great pressure. How terrifying! Is this the power of profound? But how can it be so powerful? It is indeed the power of Upanishad, but it seems to be one level deeper. Many people stopped fighting one after another and fled into the distance. They could not help but discuss and were shocked. If these people were already like this, Du Xiaofu, who bore the brunt of it, felt as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him. The vast pressure was everywhere, crushing inward from his body. Even with the strength of his immortal Xian body, he felt as if he was about to explode. This made Du Xiaofu's face become ferocious. Of the two supreme experts of the dragon race, the one that Du Xiaofu was most wary of was the old dragon named Long Huang, who looked old and frail. Just as Hun Ji had told him, the saint stage was the highest in profound. If one wanted to break through the heavenly saint stage, one had to surpass the profound, control the laws, and interpret the patterns of the great Tao with every move. Its divine power was immeasurable, and it was above all living things. Domineering Tao, rise for me. Thunder martial vein, open for me. Empty heaven and earth, break for me. Du Xiaofu shouted repeatedly. As his voice fell, a series of moves were performed with all his might. Domineering Tao was performed, and a majestic aura gushed out from Du Xiaofu's body. From the inside out, it wrapped his body in an instant, resisting the immense pressure that was everywhere. At the same time, waves of lightning lit up and crawled all over his body. In the sky, dark clouds rolled, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. An aura that seemed to split heaven and earth was rapidly brewing. A lightning bolt as thick as a mountain came crashing down, shattering the void. At the same time, the purple-gold heavenly tower appeared in Du Xiaofu's hand. A sword light that reached the sky suddenly formed and slashed toward Long Huang without hesitation. Scar of the firmament. Long Huang still looked calm, like an ancient well without any ripples. A pair of old hands faced each other and suddenly clasped together in front of his chest. Boom! The soul-shaking bang suddenly rang out in the void. Where Du Xiaofu was, the space trembled violently. Everything in that area, including Du Xiaofu himself, was distorted and shrunk in an instant. This scene looked like a piece of paper that had suddenly been crushed into a ball, producing a terrifying wrinkle. The 8 trigrams that Du Xiaofu displayed in the void wailed and then shattered. The dazzling sword light was also crushed into pieces, turning into countless talisman runes that were rubbed into the folds of space. The lightning that filled the sky had lost its guiding force and scattered. Father, Rock Emperor. This scene made Little Xingxing, Yi Piaoling, Qingguyu, and the others in the distance couldn't help but exclaim. Patriarch Long Huang's strength is so terrifying. Of course, that's the strongest expert of our dragons, the strongest foundation of our clan. How can Du Xiaofu contend against him? That's right. A childish brat dares to be arrogant and fight with the patriarch. That little thief is dead for sure. The patriarch's power is not something that ordinary people can estimate. The dragons were also in an uproar. Long Huang's strength made everyone unbelievably shocked. At the same time, they also felt that Du Xiaofu was too arrogant, daring to be impudent in front of the dragons. Under Patriarch Long Huang's attack, how could he be lucky enough to escape? As everyone watched from afar, the spatial wrinkles slowly unfolded, and returned to their original appearance. Du Xiaofu was like a reptile wrapped in paper. After unfolding, he fell out of the paper and fell from the sky. Before landing, the purple-gold heavenly fault in his hand supported his body on the ground. He bent his knees and half-knelt, so that he wouldn't completely collapse. On his body, the blue spirit armor cracked and disappeared. Purple-gold blood flowed from the corner of his mouth and dripped to the ground. His purple robe was also hanging on his body in tatters, revealing his muscles. Crisscrossing wounds were all over his body, flowing with blood. Even the indestructible Xian body, which was so strong that it was perverted, had been injured to such an extent by Long Huang's attack. Chapter 25-30. Du Xiaofu's sorry state stunned everyone for a moment. Little Xingxing, Yi Piaoling, Qianguyu, and the others were all in disbelief. After all, they were well aware of Du Xiaofu's strength. When he was in the ancient, desolate, ominous grounds, he had displayed his might in the Beast Alliance and the Holy Temple. He had killed Ancestor Zhanjie, Ancestor Fengsan, and the Yu clan's old emperor. In their impression, they couldn't remember how long it had been since Du Xiaofu had suffered such a huge loss and suffered such heavy injuries. In this world, his strength was definitely at the top. In this world, there were not many people stronger than this young man. However, today, in the Dragons, Du Xiaofu was heavily injured by an old monster who had been hiding for many years. At that instant, little Xingxing, Yi Piaoling, and the rest of the 18 were astounded. They did not move for a long time. Not only them, even the people from the Dragon clan who sneered earlier couldn't help but open their mouths wide. The Demon King's strength and terror had long been deeply ingrained in their hearts. Even if he was no match for an old monster like Long Huang who had lived for countless years, he shouldn't have lost so miserably. Is this the power of the laws? On the ground, Du Xiaofu coughed up a mouthful of violet gold blood and muttered. He quickly took out a handful of medicinal pills from his Qinkuan bag, stuffed them into his mouth and chewed. The immortal Xian body emitted a purple-gold light of thunder and lightning. The wound slowly wriggled and was rapidly recovering. He stared straight at Long Huang. In fact, Du Xiaofu knew very well that what Long Huang displayed was definitely not the purest nomological law power. This was because even if one had just entered the Heavenly Saint stage, they would not be able to completely master a complete set of laws. Moreover, Long Huang was only in the complete Saint stage, and had yet to reach the Heavenly Saint stage. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to resist at all when he attacked earlier. Moreover, he would probably have become a pile of dismembered corpses by now, and would not be standing here alive. Of course, Long Huang's true cultivation base was only a short distance away from the Heavenly Saint realm. On the level of ultimacy, he was already able to touch some deeper things and had superb techniques. This old dragon was really terrifying. Just as these thoughts flashed through Du Xiaofu's mind, Long Huang, on the other side, suddenly moved. "Kid, you can go to hell now." Seizing the opportunity when Du Xiaofu was heavily injured by Long Huang's firmament scar, Long Yu's main body suddenly soared up and attacked abruptly. Dragon's Claw, Long, Long, and Long's, Long and Long. Instantly, Long Huang, Long, Long and Long was Long Long's, and Long 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 was Long Long's Long Dragon's Long Long Dragon 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 and Long Dragon Long, Long Xiaofu's. Terrifying energy was surging out of his 5 fingers. Wherever they passed, a series of explosive noises echoed in the void. It was as if a piece of cloth had been torn into shreds. If Long Huang really hit him this time, he would definitely suffer even more serious injuries in his current state. His life might even be in danger. However, Du Xiaofu did not move. He narrowed his eyes slightly as if he was waiting for death. He did not resist at all. In the eyes of the dragons, little Xingxing, Yi Piaoling, and the others, Du Xiaofu seemed to be absent-minded for some reason. However, no one could see that there was a strange light flashing in his eyes. "Die!" Long Yu shouted when he saw Du Xiaofu's state. There wasn't the slightest bit of pity in his eyes. Long Huang's huge dragon claw fell and hit the ground hard. Boom! A terrifying vibration spread out as if it was going to destroy the world. Suddenly, The place where Du Xiaofu was originally at was smashed into pieces. A terrifying pit that was thousands of feet deep appeared. No one knew how deep it was. Father, Rock Emperor, Little Xingxing, Yi Piaoling, and the others were shocked by this scene. They could imagine that anyone would lose at least half of their life under such an attack. If it was Du Xiaofu who was seriously injured, it would be pure luck if he did not die. Hee, is this kid finally dead? How dare he come to the dragons and make trouble? He can't escape death. How can he continue to be so presumptuous under the divine power of the two patriarchs? In the distance, the dragons and the others who were watching also spoke. Their voices were filled with indescribable mockery and satisfaction. However, before the expressions on everyone's faces could fade away, they suddenly froze. Whether it was shock or sarcasm, they all froze in an instant, because the purple-robed youth who was supposed to be pressed under the dragon claw had strangely appeared under Long Yu's huge body. Be careful. At the same time, the old man on the other side noticed that something was wrong and immediately shouted to remind Long Yu. But it was already too late. Everyone saw that Du Xiaofu's torn purple robes fluttered, holding the purple-gold heavenly fault and piercing Long Yu's jaw. Then, his figure flew quickly. Chila, a long sizzling sound was heard. The purple-gold heavenly fault spewed out an inextinguishable sharpness from the dragon's head to the dragon's abdomen. Roar! Long Yu suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. Dragon blood splattered like a torrential rain. Its momentum was awe-inspiring. The huge dragon body that was like a mountain smashed down, like a mountain falling, heavily falling to the ground, causing the area to tremble for a long time. The dragon's people, Little Xingxing, Yi Piaoling, Qingguyu, and the others were stunned at the same time. Everyone's mouths were wide open, their expressions blank. Even Long Huang's old eyes were filled with disbelief. He originally wanted to rescue Long Yu, but he did not have time to do so. Roar! After Long Yu's body landed, he struggled violently and wailed. However, in less than a few breaths of time, all movements came to a sudden stop. The huge dragon body lay on the ground, no longer breathing. On his body, all the aura was withdrawn, and there was no longer any movement. Clearly, he was already deader than dead. Everyone present was deathly silent at this moment, as if their throats were pinched. No one knew how Du Xiaofu did it. Not to mention the dragon's people, even Little Xingxing, Yi Piaoling, and the rest had never seen Du Xiaofu use this move before. Such a method was simply too strange. They did not know that this was the space profundity that Du Xiaofu comprehended from the supreme beast energy left behind by a primordial great golden-winged rock powerhouse in the sky burial wasteland half a year ago. This profundity was the strongest technique of the great golden-winged rock race, and it had an unfathomable ability. In the past few months, Du Xiaofu had only used this method 3 times today. The first time was during the Beast Alliance's chaos, when he used this move to instantly kill Patriarch Zhang Jie. The second time was when he met Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yin, directly suppressing them to the point that they could not fight back. Today, he used this opportunity to cut open Patriarch Long Yu's stomach of the dragons. Cough, cough. Everyone's silence was broken by Du Xiaofu's light cough. At Long Yu's dragon tail, his body was half squatting on the ground, with his back facing Long Yu's body. In his hand, he was still using the purple-gold heavenly fault to support his body. Du Xiaofu lifted his sleeve gently and wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth, his gaze leisurely glancing at Long Huang on the other side. Originally, he did not want to kill in front of the dragons. It was just that the current situation was somewhat delicate and did not allow him to think too much. This is a spatial divine ability. Could it be the space profundity of the great golden-winged rock race? Good lad, you're indeed extraordinary. Facing Du Xiaofu's gaze, Long Huang's tone was finally no longer as calm as before, and it even became somewhat gloomy. Others did not know, but Long Huang could see some clues. Du Xiaofu's method did not have any starting momentum, and after it was activated, it was even more untraceable. In terms of profundity and laws, this performance was already above his spatial scar. Long Huang was very shocked. Such a divine ability appeared on a young person. It was truly inconceivable. Even if Long Yu could know in advance that Du Xiaofu had such a reliance, he would probably not be able to avoid it completely. However, if he could predict the enemy beforehand, he might also be able to escape with his life and avoid the outcome of being disemboweled. Long Yu and I have been on very good terms since we were young. Among the dragons back then, the two of us were the most outstanding geniuses. We also treated each other as our best friends, and at the same time, we also saw each other as our greatest opponents. But I didn't expect that so many years have already passed along the way. Long Huang's gaze shifted away from Du Xiaofu, but suddenly seemed to have sunk into the memories of the past and was filled with endless emotions. I have to say, lad, you're very impressive to actually be able to kill him. However, you have to pay a sufficient price because of this. There was no sadness in Long Huang's tone, nor was there reminiscence. But everyone could hear that boundless killing intent had already gathered in his heart at this moment, and it was unstoppable. And at the same time that his voice fell, Long Huang also moved. His old body straightened his back and slowly walked in the direction of Du Xiaofu with steady steps. As he walked, he once again stretched out his hands and began to draw in the air. His finger drew a series of complicated, obscure, and strange trajectories. A strange rhythm rippled, and the strange charm from before appeared once again. A strong sense of oppression filled the space, making it difficult for people to breathe. Old thing, that's enough. The corners of Du Xiaofu's mouth twitched as he said softly. Then, he did not continue to fight head-on with him. Taking advantage of the moment when Long Huang's technique had just started, he used the Fuyao move again. The purple-robed figure disappeared from the spot, breaking free from the restraint of the power of ultimacy and appearing hundreds of feet away. Long Huang exclaimed. Although he had already confirmed that Du Xiaofu had the strongest technique of the golden-winged Great Rock Clan, he did not expect that Du Xiaofu would be able to use it. But he did not expect that the space power he used would be so easily broken and allowed him to escape. The unparalleled pressure in the space was unable to trap him this time around. If you want to take revenge for that old mixed blood dragon of yours, come and kill me, Du Xiaofu sneered. After escaping the pressure that filled the space, he turned around and flew out without any delay. He could sense that Long Huang's understanding of space was indeed very profound. But this did not mean that his technique was invincible. With the strangeness and overbearingness of the Fuyao style, it was still very easy to neutralize it. Since he could not defeat this old dragon in a head-on fight, he would use another method to deal with him. This is my dragons. Where can you escape to? Long Huang retracted his palm and chased after Du Xiaofu. At the same time, he ordered the dragons behind him without turning back. Activate the dragon imprisoning array. Today, we must not let this boy leave. Yes. In the distance, the powerhouses of the dragons responded. Some elders quickly flew in all directions. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, a loud dragon roar resounded through the 9 heavens and 10 lands. Then, a vast amount of pressure spread out and landed on everyone's body. This is... Little Xingxing, Yi Piaoling, and the others were puzzled. They could only hear the dragon roar and feel the terrifying pressure. However, there was no sign of anything out of the ordinary. What in the world was the dragon heaven imprisoning grand array that Long Huang spoke of? Let me go and take a look. Among the crowd, Qi Guiyu immediately flew up into the sky. However, when he reached a height of 10,000 feet, a vast light suddenly lit up. The ray of light quickly transformed into the shape of an azure dragon. It opened its huge mouth and swallowed Qi Guiyu whole. Oh no, say Brother 12. Stone shouted hurriedly. At the same time, Yi Piaoling, Qin Guiyu, and the others also moved. The 17 people rushed up together. The saint weapons in their hands emitted terrifying energy. After a long time, they finally shattered the azure dragon formed by the light and Qi Guiyu's figure appeared. However, before they could say anything, they saw light surging around them again, and dozens of azure dragons appeared again. Every single one of these azure dragons carried a terrifying might, and they were similar to the primordial nirvana dragon formation. We can't stay here. Let's go back to the ground, Yi Piaoling said in a low voice. He was the first to bend down. The others naturally followed. At this moment, they finally understood what the so-called dragon-imprisoning Grand Formation was. Under the seal of the array, this place was a forbidden area that was isolated from the outside world. If they forced their way out, they would be attacked by the power of the array. With this array, it was not easy for them to leave the dragons. One could imagine that the dragons were completely surrounded by this array. No one could easily leave. Long Huang's goal was to trap Du Xiaofu so that he could not escape. Then, he would find an opportunity to kill him. With Du Xiaofu's severely injured body and his escape route cut off, if he rashly split his attention to break the array, it would only give Long Huang a good opportunity to attack. This situation was really dangerous. Little Xingxing, Yi Piaoling, and the others could not help but worry. You shameless old mixed blood dragon. You're really shameless. Du Xiaofu cursed as he flew. He naturally knew the power of the dragon-imprisoning array. At this time, even space was suppressed to a certain extent. He could not break through the air. Fortunately, the move Fuyao was not hindered. He could freely use it. Otherwise, it would not be long before he fell into Long Huang's hands. Young man, you can't escape. Long Huang stepped into the void, moving slowly step by step. However, every step he took covered a distance of thousands of feet. Every time Du Xiaofu used spatial techniques and appeared in a certain place, his old figure would catch up and fall far away. He could not shake him off. This can't go on. As Du Xiaofu hurried along, he secretly calculated. The range of the dragons was extremely vast. He did not know how big it was. However, he did not know where he could make use of it to launch a counterattack against Long Huang. What is that place? It's a little strange. Du Xiaofu looked at an area thousands of miles away. That place was a rocky area. It was not accurate to say that it was a rocky area. That was because every stone was the size of a small mountain and had distinct edges and corners. Countless such stones were piled up messily. They were rugged and piled up here and there. It was like an unmarked graveyard. From it, Du Xiaofu sensed a strange aura. It was dignified and powerful. Du Xiaofu carefully sensed it, but inexplicably shuddered. A chill rose from the soles of his feet and rushed straight to his head. Forget it. I'll take a gamble. Du Xiaofu gritted his teeth. He did not care what kind of terrifying thing was there and rushed over. Even if he really encountered a peerless, ferocious creature, he might be able to take the opportunity to deal with Long Huang. However, if his luck was bad enough, he might summon an old dragon that had been hidden for countless years. At that time, he would really be courting death. However, other than gambling, Du Xiaofu did not have a better choice. As he thought about it, Du Xiaofu did not hesitate. Instead, he sped up. With his speed, he quickly flew hundreds of miles and arrived at the center of the pile of rocks. Then, without thinking, he plunged headfirst into the ground. With the strength of Du Xiaofu's body, even if he was seriously injured, a mere boulder could not stop his footsteps. Purple gold lightning flashed on his body. After a bang, a hole was drilled in the pile of rocks. His body entered and was buried by countless rolling rocks. What is Du Xiaofu trying to do? That is the sleeping dragon cave. It is a forbidden area for us dragons. He is going to the forbidden area of our tribe. Sleeping Dragon Cave, what is there? In the distance, the experts of the dragons also discovered Du Xiaofu's purpose and could not help but discuss it. They did not fight with the people of the desolate country again. Everyone's attention was focused on the chase between Long Huang and Du Xiaofu. No one from the dragons has ever entered. They don't know what kind of place it is. That's right. I've only heard that the Sleeping Dragon Cave existed a long time ago. I just don't know what is hidden there. If that Demon King escapes, will Patriarch Long Huang still dare to continue the chase? The experts of the dragons discussed animatedly. Among the people present, only Dragon Nine's expression began to turn ugly. The existence of the Sleeping Dragon Cave was too distant. The dragons had long listed it as a forbidden area. No one dared to violate the tribe's rules and take half a step in. Over time, everyone got used to it and treated it as a normal thing. As long as no one violated the tribe's rules, no one would think of this forbidden area. At this moment, Du Xiaofu, a person who came from the outside world, directly rushed in rashly. Long Jiugu could not help but recall some of the special legends he had heard when he was young. Rumor has it that there is an expert who has been sleeping there since ancient times. He is an ancestor of the dragons and is extremely powerful. As soon as Dragon 9 opened his mouth to speak, the other dragons closed their mouths at the same time and quietly listened to him. If one day, when some kind of opportunity is reached, this ancestor will awaken. Or perhaps, when the dragons are in danger of being exterminated, that ancestor will be the final foundation of the dragons and can help us survive the calamity. It's just that the tribe has long established a rule. No one from the dragons is allowed to disturb the ancestor's deep sleep. As long as the ancestor doesn't come out of seclusion on his own, even if the dragons are completely destroyed, then so be it. I just don't know if that ancestor is still alive today. Dragon 9 spoke slowly, his gaze unhurried. After every member of the dragons heard this, their bodies trembled. One had to know who Dragon 9 was. He was an expert who could participate in the battle with the demon god in the primordial era. In the end, he suppressed the demon god's primordial spirit in the eternal tomb for countless years. How many years ago did he have to go back to his childhood? In that era, the heavens and earth were not suppressed, and the overall strength of living beings was much stronger than it was now. Under those circumstances, that ancestor could actually be the strongest foundation of the dragons. One could imagine how terrifying it would be if he could wake up now. Moreover, the rules of the tribe were too strict. Even when the tribe was facing destruction, they could not take the initiative to wake up the ancestor. They could only pray that the ancestor would wake up on his own. Hee, ancestor, does that mean that Du Xiaofu is dead for sure? That's right. It's one thing for him to barge into the dragons, but he actually wants to use the sleeping dragon cave to avoid being killed. If he angers that sleeping ancestor, wouldn't he be courting death? If that's the case, why don't we just let him go? Ancestor Long Huang doesn't need to take the risk to enter the sleeping dragon cave. Some people were gloating, thinking that Du Xiaofu was already dead for sure. There were also some people who were worried for Ancestor Long Huang. They were afraid that he would disregard the tribe's rules and barge into the sleeping dragon cave in order to kill Du Xiaofu. If that ancestor was really still alive in this world, he would definitely incur his thunderous wrath. At that time, Ancestor Long Huang would probably also receive terrifying punishment. However, what these people were worried about did not happen. Long Huang had lived for a longer time than Dragon 9. Naturally, he had also heard of those rumors. In fact, he knew more than Dragon 9 and knew the pros and cons of it. Seeing Du Xiaofu plunge into the pile of rocks, his footsteps stopped in the void and did not follow. Could it be that the ancestors of the dragons from the outside world are still alive? Long Huang stood in the air and muttered to himself. Chapter 25:31. Little Star, Yi Piaoling, and the others heard the discussion among the dragons. They could not help but worry for Du Xiaofu. I'm going to save my father. Little Star had already returned to his human form. Without another word, he flew towards the sleeping dragon cave. If there was really an old dragon that had been sleeping for many years, then Du Xiaofu would be in great danger. Let's go. Yi Piaoling's eyes glowed as she led Xinguyu, Stone, Jiang Yinfeng, and the rest of the 18 people to follow. Stop them! Seeing the actions of the people from the barren country, Long Jiugu shouted out, how can we allow these humans to enter and disturb the resting place of our dragon race ancestors? As he spoke, he raised his hand and shot out a ray of divine light that enveloped Little Star. When the other powerful dragons saw this, they prepared to attack as well. They wanted to stop Yi Piaoling, Xinguyu, and the rest. Du Xiaofu, that bastard, does not know what's good for him. He broke into our forbidden area. I'm afraid he won't be able to escape. Long Qinchao said, we can use this opportunity to get rid of all of his lackeys. These words instantly roused the spirits of the dragon clan. The current situation was obviously leaning towards their side. Du Xiaofu had entered the sleeping dragon cave. Without his restraint, if Patriarch Long Huang turned around and came back, he could easily take the lives of these people from the desolate country. In an instant, everyone attacked with all their might. stopping the 18 celestial generals. Both sides fought with all their might. As for Long Jogu, he let out a roar and once again transformed into his original form to stop Little Star. A terrifying battle broke out again. Dozens of sage state experts fought fiercely. Terrifying energy swept across the area, shaking the 9 heavens and the 9 hells. The area around the dragons was in an uproar. However, the dragons did not quickly suppress the arrogance of the desolate country people as the dragons had hoped. This was because their patriarch Long Huang did not attack. Under such circumstances, the difference in strength between the two sides was not huge. In a short period of time, no one could do anything to the other. On the other side, Long Huang was still standing above the pile of rocks, silently looking down. He did not seem to sense the great battle behind him. He gathered all the power of his soul and probed downwards. He really wanted to know if the ancestors of the dragons were still alive in the sleeping dragon cave under the cover of the rubble. Countless years have passed, but no one has ever seen that ancestor, let alone know what all this means to the dragons. Long Huang was uncertain in his heart. Even with his current cultivation, the aura emanating from that place would cause his heart to palpitate. It was precisely because he knew more than the others that he was not as optimistic about the dragon ancestors sleeping in the dragon slumber cave as the others of his race. All the legends were just old rumors. Perhaps there were people who knew the meaning behind the existence of the dragon's forbidden area. However, those people had already died before the ancient era. As for Long Huang himself, he only knew a little more than the juniors behind him. He could not be sure if the old dragons in the sleeping dragon cave would be a blessing or a curse for the present-day dragons once they woke up. Long Huang was silent. Considering the ban passed down by the clan, he did not dare to go down to investigate directly. However, his mind was still probing downwards with all his might, wanting to know and capture any possible movements at the first possible moment. At this moment, Du Xiaofu was in a somewhat awkward situation. After drilling into the rubble, he went all the way down, descending about 1,000 feet. It was not too deep. Below was a black and blurry space. It was indeed a different world. However, after entering, the power of his soul was greatly disturbed and completely lost its effect. He could only observe with his naked eye. Therefore, he could only control his body and land on the ground naturally. However, with the help of the faint light emitted by the purple-gold heavenly palace, Du Xiaofu soon discovered that what he was stepping on was not ground. It was clearly the nose bridge of a creature. There were 2 long and scorching breaths slowly spewing out from those nostrils. But this was nothing, because when Du Xiaofu just landed, this creature seemed to be in a deep sleep. No need to think. What was lying here was absolutely a terrifying lord. Judging from the aura, it was absolutely much stronger than Long Huang. When Du Xiaofu noticed this, he immediately had the intention of retreating. He also did not dare to use his cultivation and use the light to illuminate this place and see this creature's specific appearance clearly, even though its body emitted an extremely terrifying and vast aura, making Du Xiaofu tremble a little. But after all, as long as he did not wake it up, there was still a chance to escape safely. Du Xiaofu instantly had a plan in his heart. It was better to think of a way to leave this place as soon as possible. However, Du Xiaofu had just lifted 1 foot and was about to leave. But all of a sudden, his heart trembled violently as if it had been grabbed by a large hand, because he saw a bright light appear in his eyes. Such a bright light was right next to Du Xiaofu. It was as bright as the blazing sun, causing Du Xiaofu to be instantly blinded, leaving only haziness in his eyes. Then, a terrifying heat wave rolled over like a turbid wave, carrying a terrifyingly high temperature, making Du Xiaofu's body somewhat unable to withstand this impact. Fortunately, the strong light and heat wave only lasted for a breath's time, and then slowly subsided a lot. But even so, it was still a little dazzling. Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes and raised his hand to cover his eyes. Looking through the gaps between his fingers, his line of sight wandered around in a circle. What he saw made his heart even more shocked. The light was not 1, but 2. It was a pair of eyes of the creature under his feet, looking straight at him at this moment. At the same time, Du Xiaofu roughly saw the creature's appearance. Above the pair of eyes, there were two objects that looked like tree branches and were shaped like antlers. Scales the size of tiles were densely covered on its skin, flickering with a green light and looking frightening. Dragon? Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that there would be such a dragon slumbering under this pile of rocks. This dragon was entrenched here in its original form and was not huge. Compared to Long Yu, Dragon 9, Long Qianchao, and the rest, it even seemed abnormally small. Otherwise, Du Xiaofu would not have seen its appearance clearly with just a sweep of his gaze. However, the color of the dragon scales on this dragon's body could not help but shock him. An azure dragon. Du Xiaofu stood where he was, his eyes locked with the dragon's as he spoke with trembling lips. For a moment, he actually forgot that he was still standing on the other party's nose bridge. Chapter 25:32. Du Xiaofu stared at the azure dragon in front of him, not moving for a long time. On the dragon's body, a powerful pressure assaulted him, making it difficult for him to breathe. His hands and feet were not listening to his commands. Such a terrifying overlord was absolutely terrifying to the extreme. Its bloodline was definitely much purer than the dragons outside. In this world, perhaps only Fui Bai, the old lunatic, and a few others could compete with it. Du Xiaofu knew that the Azure Dragon clan was the main clan of the dragons. But he did not understand. Why was there such an azure dragon hiding here? Little fellow, is it comfortable to step on this old dragon's nose? Just as Du Xiaofu was stunned, the azure dragon under his feet spoke. An unusually old voice came out, sounding a little hoarse and vicissitudes, as if it had not spoken for a long time. Du Xiaofu was slightly startled, but soon recovered and flew away, leaving the azure dragon's nose bridge, and went far away. When the azure dragon finished speaking, the pressure that filled the sky suddenly retracted, causing him to instantly feel the pressure greatly reduced, and he could move freely. Senior, this junior did not mean to disturb. Please forgive me. Du Xiaofu shook the tattered sleeves of his purple robe and bowed. No matter where this azure dragon came from, it was better to calm it down first. Its strength was too terrifying. If he accidentally angered it, it might directly slap him to death with its claws. That would be a great loss. As for the rest, it was better to slowly probe. Little guy, who are you? Why is the aura on your body so strange? There is the aura of the Golden-Winged Rock Clan, the Phoenix Clan, and us dragons. Other than that, there is also the aura of lightning. It's actually that kind of martial vein. The azure dragon blinked its bright eyes and said to Du Xiaofu. When it sensed Du Xiaofu's lightning martial vein, its pair of dragon eyes opened wide, obviously shocked. Senior, this junior is Du Xiaofu. The lightning martial vein in my body was engraved by the ancestors of my clan. As for the rest, I obtained them by chance. Du Xiaofu cupped his fists and said, not hiding anything. He did not doubt that this azure dragon had interacted with his ancestor before. After all, this was an existence that had lived longer than Long Huang. Du clan, lightning martial vein. Could it be that you're that person's descendant? I have been sleeping here for many years. I did not expect to see his descendant. The azure dragon spoke, its words as if it was shocked. Senior know my ancestor? Du Xiaofu couldn't help asking when he saw this. Ever since he witnessed the primeval battle in the tomb of the heavenly Tao, Du Xiaofu had found out about his ancestor's identity. However, he still hadn't met any of his ancestor's old acquaintances until now. Of Shaofan times, the dragon, Lin, the dragon, Lin to dragon. For example, Huolei Lao Zu, Fui Bai, Crazy Ol, and the others might only know about the Du family's ancestor, but they did not have much interaction with him. Perhaps in this world, the person who understood the Du family's ancestor the most was the demon god who caused the great calamity. No, that hero had unparalleled talent, and I could only look up to him. The azure dragon shook its head and said regretfully, it's a pity that he fell. There was a hint of sadness in its words. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu could not help but feel sad. However, now was not the time to be sentimental. Suppressing the emotions in his heart, Du Xiaofu looked at the azure dragon curiously and asked again, "What is this place? Senior, have you been sleeping here all this time?" He did not hear the discussion of Dragon 9 and the others outside, so he knew nothing about the situation in the Sleeping Dragon Cave. "You are right. This place should be called the Sleeping Dragon Cave by the dragons, and I have been sleeping for countless years to wait for." As the azure dragon spoke, it suddenly made a sound of surprise. Du Xiaofu only saw that its huge eyes once again bloomed with divine light as it looked at the pitch-black void. That gaze seemed to be able to see through everything and learn about the movements of the outside world. "Haha, I really didn't expect that when I woke up, I would actually meet the person I was waiting for." The azure dragon's old and hoarse voice chuckled. At the same time, he raised his dragon head and his dragon body stood upright as he rushed into the sky. His huge body, which was not very strong, moved slightly, and there was a rumbling sound. A vast pressure filled every inch of space and directly attacked Du Xiaofu's primordial spirit, making it difficult to resist. The void trembled violently, and rocks the size of small mountains fell from above. These rocks were from the piles of rocks above the Sleeping Dragon Cave. The azure dragon suddenly turned around and left, leaving Du Xiaofu standing in place in a daze. At this time, among the dragons, the great battle between Little Xingxing, the 18 celestial generals, Dragon 9, Long Qianchao, and the others was still ongoing. But all of a sudden, everyone only heard a bang sound of an explosion. At the location of the Sleeping Dragon Cave, huge rocks flew in all directions in an instant, like a landslide, and a huge black hole exploded on the ground. Long Huang's reaction could not be said to be slow. When he realized that something was wrong, he quickly fled at the first moment and went far away. Then, there was a dragon roar that reverberated and spread throughout the dragons. What followed was an overwhelming pressure that spread rapidly, suppressing everyone's primordial spirit. An azure dragon rushed out of the black hole, with clouds and mist rising around it, and flew above everyone. For a moment, all the dragons who were fighting fiercely were suddenly shocked, and the strength of their bodies was suppressed. They all fell to the ground with a thud, sending dust flying and a huge pit spreading. Even an expert like Long Huang was greatly affected and flew directly to the ground in the distance, watching quietly. This is, among the dragons, someone's voice trembled as he spoke. No one had ever tasted such a terrifying pressure before. Could it be that there really is an ancestor of the dragons who was sleeping in the Sleeping Dragon Cave, and today, he woke up? There was also someone who said in shock. Although they were already mentally prepared, they still could not help but be shocked when they saw it with their own eyes. "Azure Dragon, that's actually an azure dragon." There was also someone who shouted loudly. In this world, there was no existence of the azure dragon. Because of the purity and nobility of its bloodline, generally, only the main clan in the outside world could see it. Their own bloodlines were far inferior compared to that of the bloodline of the Nine Heavens monarch. But who would have dared to imagine that after Du Xiaofu's disturbance and barging into the Sleeping Dragon Cave, it actually alarmed this terrifying master? Has that brat Du Xiaofu already been killed by the ancestor? And just as everyone was exclaiming, Long Qianchao spoke. Although he was under tremendous pressure, and his voice was somewhat trembling when he spoke. But at the thought that Du Xiaofu was very likely already dead, Long Qianchao's heart faintly became somewhat excited. Chapter 25:33. Inside the Sleeping Dragon Cave, the emergence of the azure dragon shocked all of them. The powerful aura that naturally flowed out was all-pervasive, causing the weaker dragons to not even dare to breathe loudly. Under the aura of a high-grade bloodline of the same clan, the pressure they endured was much greater than Yi Piaoling and the others. Among those present, perhaps only Little Xingxing's expression could be considered relaxed. However, under the control of the azure dragon, the earth-shattering pressure was quickly withdrawn. Everyone instantly regained their ability to move. Long Huang pays his respects to the main clan ancestor. Long Huang, who had gone far away, did not dare to be arrogant in front of the azure dragon. He immediately walked back and bowed. The people of the dragons pay their respects to the main clan ancestor. The other people of the dragons also came forward and bowed one after another. Is Du Xiaofu really dead? Dragon 9 bowed alone, thinking the same thing as Long Qianchao. He also had a faint hope that Du Xiaofu had died at the hands of the azure dragon that had suddenly appeared. That way, it would save the dragons a lot of trouble. However, he did not have the courage to ask such a question. However, the azure dragon did not even spare a glance at the dragon clan's people who were paying their respects. His gaze, however, was staring straight at a young and immature figure with an imposing aura. This figure was little Xingxing. She had now returned to the appearance of a little girl. Her eyes were suffused with 7 colors as she looked seriously at the azure dragon in front of her. You finally arrived. Ha ha ha. The azure dragon looked at little Xingxing as a faint light bloomed from his body. Then, in the hazy light, he turned into the appearance of an old man. He held a crutch in his hand that was propped up in the air, supporting his hunched back. The old man's face was benevolent. His turbid eyes were slightly narrowed as if he could not see clearly. His old face was wrinkled like tree bark as he chuckled. Who are you? Little Star stared at the azure dragon vigilantly, the mark between his eyebrows flashing with a strange light. He slowly released the pressure from his bloodline in an attempt to intimidate the azure dragon. She couldn't be sure what the azure dragon's motive was for suddenly waking up from its slumber cave and coming here. Most importantly, little Xingxing did not see Du Xiaofu appear. He was afraid that his father had already been harmed by this old dragon. This old man, Long Gu, greets young miss. The doddering old man leaned on his walking stick and took 2 steps in the air before suddenly bowing to Little Star. Young miss? Little Xingxing was a little confused. Upon hearing Long Gu's words, Long Huang, Dragon 9, Long Qianchao, and the others' eyes nearly popped out of their sockets as they exchanged glances with one another. Where did this azure dragon come from? Why did he address the purple dragon emperor as young miss? Even Yi Piaoling, Qin Guyu, and the others couldn't believe their eyes. Although they knew that little Xingxing had an extraordinary background, the azure dragon's attitude made it seem as if it had been waiting for her for many years. You were sent by my father? After a brief moment of confusion, little Xingxing quickly figured out the crux of the matter and couldn't help but ask. She clenched her little fists tightly and appeared very agitated. If it wasn't for someone's instructions, why would there be an azure dragon waiting for her here? Just as young Miss said, this old man was sent by the Lord to wait for young Miss's return in this world. Elder Long Gu's attitude was very respectful. At the same time, there was a hint of affection in his tone. Everyone was a little dumbfounded when they heard his words. It was really as they thought. Long Gu had indeed been hibernating in the slumber cave to wait for the purple dragon emperor's return. Father! Little Xingxing clenched her fists as 2 streams of tears rolled down her tender little face. Her body trembled slightly. Ever since she was born, she had never seen her biological parents. She only knew that she was the daughter of the dragon god, and that the blood of the vermilion bird flowed in her body. When she was in the Phoenix tribe, she had once received the inheritance left behind by her mother. Little Xingxing had always felt that she would only be able to come into contact with more of what her father had left behind after she had gone to other worlds. However, she never thought that her father had already arranged for an azure dragon to be among the dragons, and it had been waiting here for countless years. How could she not be agitated by this? However, she quickly suppressed the stirring emotions of longing and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes with her sleeve. She then asked Long Gu calmly, "Where's my father? What did you do to him?" Long Gu was stunned by the question and could not react for a long time. He completely did not understand what his young miss meant. Who was her father? That was the dragon god, a powerful cultivator who was second to none in the 3,000 great worlds. He was an existence that he could never hope to reach. What could he do to such a terrifying figure? Even if he ate a bear's heart and leopard's gall for 10,000 years, he would not dare to harbor any improper thoughts. Looking at Long Gu's stunned expression, little Xingxing immediately understood that he must have misunderstood. This was because the father she was referring to was naturally Du Xiaofu. Not long ago, Did someone enter the sleeping dragon cave? What did you do to him? Little Xingxing stared at Long Gu without blinking as the aura on her body gradually brewed. It seemed that as long as Long Gu's next answer indicated that Du Xiaofu was really hurt, she would attack without hesitation. Young miss, are you talking about that little human fellow? The look of astonishment on Long Gu's old face became even more pronounced. In the sleeping dragon cave, he had only seen a young human. His young miss actually called that young man father? What the fuck was going on? Don't worry, I'm fine. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's voice rang out from the pile of rocks. Father, how are you? Little Xingxing cheered and quickly rushed to Du Xiaofu's side. She opened her eyes wide and sized up Du Xiaofu from head to toe as if she wanted to see through him. Don't worry, your father is fine. Du Xiaofu smiled and reached out his hand, rubbing little Xingxing's hair with all his might until it was a mess. The little girl instantly pouted her little mouth in dissatisfaction and pushed his hand away. Du Xiaofu pulled little Xingxing's hand and walked in front of Long Gu. He had already changed into a brand new set of purple robes. Senior. Du Xiaofu bowed slightly to Long Gu. Long Gu looked at the purple-robed youth in front of him, his old face blushing as he asked speechlessly, You are really the father that young miss mentioned? What on earth is going on? Towards this old azure dragon, Du Xiaofu had nothing to hide. Following that, he briefly explained his relationship with little Xingxing. So that's how it is. After Long Gu heard, he nodded his head and thanked Du Xiaofu heavily. Thank you for taking care of young miss all these years. Chapter 25-34. Senior, you don't have to be like this. Du Xiaofu returned a bow to Long Gu and said, Looking at the current situation, this azure dragon was sent here by the dragon god. Then, he would not stand on the opposing side toward him and little Xingxing. The dragon's people also did not dare to do any rebellious actions under his deterrence. Senior, just as Du Xiaofu and Long Gu were talking, Long Qianchao stepped forward carefully, wanting to speak but hesitating. Amen? What is it? Long Gu turned his head and asked in puzzlement, You're a senior from the main race. You should uphold justice for us dragons. Long Qianchao suddenly knelt down in front of Long Gu and prostrated, making the others all have dumbfounded expressions. Only after a moment did everyone understand. Long Qianchao's meaning was very simple. Presently, Du Xiaofu brought little Xingxing and the 18 heavenly generals guards to charge to the dragons, wanting to subdue them and deal with the upcoming great calamity of heaven and earth. It was just that the dragons were not willing to get involved in this muddy water at all, let alone that there was still an unresolvable grudge with Du Xiaofu. Their ancestor Long Yu's corpse was lying not far away. This kind of hatred, how could the dragons possibly be ordered around by Du Xiaofu? If not for this azure dragon's appearance, with ancestor Long Huang's strength, wanting to kill Du Xiaofu was probably not hard either. But if they continued to make a move at this time, Long Gu would definitely interfere for little Xingxing. At that time, even if they were in the right, they could not explain it clearly anymore. One had to admit, Long Qianchao's action of striking first to gain the upper hand was really very wise. Except, Du Xiaofu laughed coldly and said, The great calamity of heaven and earth is imminent. The dragons don't want to do their best for the common people, but only know how to play it safe. This so-called top major race of this world, aren't you afraid of being laughed at by countless living beings? Great calamity of heaven and earth? Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, Long Gu was stunned. Clearly, he had been asleep for many years at this time and was virtually unaware of the outside world's matters. That's right. Senior must also know about the great calamity caused by the ancient fiend god. Du Xiaofu explained in a timely manner. Primordial era? Demon god? When Long Gu heard this, 2 rays of light shot out from his old eyes, and he looked a little stunned. I know that the demon god has been suppressed by the master of the 3,000 great worlds, Lord Dragon God, and the ancestor you mentioned, but I didn't know that it had already become an ancient matter. Looks like I've slept for a really long time. The old dragon immediately looked at Du Xiaofu with shining eyes and asked in surprise, Could it be that the demon god has escaped again? Du Xiaofu nodded and said seriously, That's right. The demon god has been recovering all this time, and I'm afraid it won't be long before he reaches his peak state. When that time comes, this world will once again be plunged into endless blood and slaughter. No living creature will be able to stay out of it. You're right. Longu nodded in agreement and said, that demon god is someone that even the masters of the 3,000 major cosmos and Lord Dragon God couldn't kill even when they joined forces. If he's allowed to revive again, he'll bring an endless blood disaster to this world. All living creatures can only have hope of fighting against him if they unite as one. However, there is only a little hope. After all, the demon god is too powerful. Now, the master of the 3,000 great worlds and Lord Dragon God are not here, and your ancestor has already fallen. I'm afraid no one in this world can restrain him. Senior's words are reasonable, but no matter how powerful the demon god is, we can't just wait for death. Du Xiaofu took over the conversation and glanced at Long Huang, Dragon 9, and the others. I came to the dragons this time to hope that they can understand the principle of righteousness and unite all the forces that can be united to fight against the demon god together. However, the dragons don't seem to want to get involved in this matter. Senior, this Du Xiaofu killed countless experts of our dragons. It can be said that our hatred runs deep. We can't ignore the difference between them. Most importantly, the dragons don't have much strength left and can't bear the consumption anymore. If we force ourselves to participate in the battle against the devil religion, I'm afraid our clan will really be wiped out. Senior, please make a wise decision. Dragon 9 walked forward and said to Long Gu in a deep voice. However, these words made Du Xiaofu laugh coldly again. Who doesn't know what kind of character you have? You're afraid when the demon god is mentioned? All these years, what happened to your vows to hunt me down and kill me? Where's the pride of you dragons? Do you only know how to be high and mighty and bully the weak? I'll say something you don't like to hear, but with the power of the dragons now, it won't be of much use in the great calamity. I'm just afraid that you will stab everyone in the back when all living creatures are united against the demon god. To be honest, if it weren't for little Xingxing, I wouldn't mind bringing people to kill all of you dragons. Du Xiaofu, don't slander me. Dragon 9 was extremely arrogant. He pointed at Du Xiaofu's nose and scolded. It's a fact that you killed my dragon's people. You can't deny it no matter what. No matter how many reasons there are between us, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I really didn't expect the dragons to have hidden experts like Long Huang and Long Yu. But this doesn't mean that you've really won. Long Yu has already died under my sword. If you're not convinced, then continue to compete and see whose fist is stronger. Du Xiaofu shook his robes and said in a clear voice. Previously, he was caught off guard and was severely injured by Long Huang's space scar. He was indeed powerless to fight head-on. Even so, he still found an opportunity to kill Long Yu. At this time, the elixirs that he had swallowed had taken effect, allowing his Xin Qi to recover quite a bit. His immortal Xin body had also been recovering. Even if he was facing an expert like Long Huang, he was not afraid and dared to fight again. Du Xiaofu looked at Long Gu leisurely. Under the restriction of little Xingxing, this senile azure dragon would probably not do anything to him. This way, he still had a certain chance of winning. Long Qinxiao jumped out and said angrily, Du Xiaofu, you're still so arrogant. My dragons. However, before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Long Gu. Enough. Old Azure Dragon's turbid eyes shone brightly as his shriveled lips slowly opened. I don't know about the grudges between you, and I don't want to know. I don't know who's right and who's wrong, and I don't want to know either. Long Gu slowly turned his head and swept his gaze across Long Qinxiao, Dragon 9, and the others. Finally, he fixed his gaze on Long Huang. His tone was calm but full of anger as he said, I only hope that you can know your place and know your own identity. Old Azure Dragon looked at little Xingxing again, a hint of gentleness creeping onto his old face. The words that came out of his mouth were directed at the dragons and the others. They were incomparably cold. Chapter 25:36. A gratified smile appeared on Long Gu's bark-like face, expressing extreme admiration for little Xingxing's words. Although this little girl was young, She had an unusual demeanor in her actions. First Miss is righteous and benevolent. Why aren't you thanking her? Long Gu pulled a long face and turned to say to Long Huang and the rest. The dragons did not dare to be arrogant here. They all turned and bowed to little Xingxing, saying in unison, "We are willing to follow the purple dragon emperor and face the great calamity together. We swear to die without regrets." Hearing this, Long Gu nodded in satisfaction. He knew in his heart that the dragon's current performance was due to his intimidation. If they were really obedient to his first miss, they would not be able to avoid many methods of discipline in the future. However, this was not something that could be done in a short period of time. As members of the same race, I naturally hope that all of you can survive the great calamity. Now, don't be restrained by worldly matters. Go and cultivate. Raise everyone's cultivation level at all costs. Little Xingxing gave the order to the dragons, and a seven-colored radiance appeared in her eyes. Her words were not completely to win people's hearts. There was also a considerable portion of her heartfelt words. Everyone responded in unison and dispersed. Even Long Huang and Dragon 9 did not stay. With this outcome, little Xingxing could be considered to have truly become the master of the dragons. Naturally, her and Du Xiaofu's actions would no longer be scrupulous. First Miss, Lord Dragon God left something in the sleeping dragon cave. Go and take a look. After all the dragons retreated, Long Gu bowed and said to little Xingxing, "Something left behind by my father?" Little Xingxing's eyes lit up. Something left behind by her father must be extraordinary. "Father, let's go and take a look." Little Xingxing pulled Du Xiaofu and turned around, heading towards the sleeping dragon cave together. Long Gu did not stop them. He knew that the purple-robed youth before him had a close relationship with his first Mississippi. It was not inferior to a real father and daughter relationship, right? Little Xingxing suddenly stopped, turned around and said to Long Gu, "Although you were sent by my father, you are still older than me. There's no need to call me Mississippi. Just call me little Xingxing from now on. This young miss is the daughter of Lord Dragon God. You absolutely cannot do this." Long Gu hurriedly waved his hand with a determined look on his face. Little Xingxing looked at him. After a moment of silence, he said helplessly, "All right then." After saying that, he no longer bothered about these matters and entered the sleeping dragon cave with Du Xiaofu. Under Long Gu's lead, the two of them descended and once again entered the black and misty space. This time around, Du Xiaofu was able to freely release a brilliant light that illuminated the entire space without Long Gu's suppressive aura. Everything was naturally reflected in the eyes of the three of them. "It's down there." Long Gu pointed at his feet with his walking stick and said softly. In the direction he was pointing, there was a valley that wasn't very big. Countless fine sand and stones were scattered all over the place, making it look a little messy, like a barren field. Everything looked so ordinary. One could not see the slightest bit of abnormality. "Young miss, this place can only be opened by your bloodline," Long Gu said to little Xingxing. Little Xingxing nodded his head when he heard that and extended a scallion-like finger. Under the circulation of his strength, a drop of fresh blood rapidly flowed out from his fingertip. Buzz. When this drop of fresh blood appeared, it seemed to have been resonated by some kind of special power. It suddenly blossomed with a dazzling brilliance like the scorching sun, illuminating the entire space. The blood slowly dripped down, causing the void to rumble. The three of them could feel that their bodies started to sway slightly along with it. When this drop of fresh blood really landed on the ground, a loud bang suddenly rang out, like a giant mountain smashing into the sea. Endless energy gushed out, scattering towards the surrounding space. Densely packed talisman mystic runes rushed to the sky, like a flock of ants moving out, flying in all directions. The sand and stone ground was shaking, trembling without end. That originally looked simple and unadorned valley area erupted with a brilliance that shot into the sky, blurring the three people's vision. They could not see the situation below clearly at all. This aura. Du Xiaofu's eyes trembled. He felt a powerful dragon's might surging, crossing time and space, from the ancient times to the present world. A terrifying pressure pervaded, filling every inch of space. An invisible force impacted Du Xiaofu's soul, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. My father, that's my father's aura. Little Xingxing's voice sounded, his tone trembling. Du Xiaofu turned to look at her, only to see two streaks of sparkling tears on her tender little face. Young miss, you can leave now, Long Gu said with a slight tremble in his voice. However, there was an indescribable respect on his face. Little Xingxing replied with a "hmm," and turned around to greet Du Xiaofu. Then, he didn't delay any longer, and directly rushed into the light in the sky, disappearing. Soon, in the eyes of Du Xiaofu and Long Gu, the light that was as dazzling as the sun below once again erupted with an even more terrifying power. Swoosh! A terrifying aura suddenly rose like a tidal wave, rolling up boundless frenzied tides. Du Xiaofu and Long Gu's bodies were like a small boat in the boundless waves, swept into the heart of the storm. An inexplicable feeling rose in their hearts. They were completely powerless, and even speaking seemed very powerless. This was an unprecedented experience. It was as if nothing could be controlled by oneself, and everything could only be manipulated by others. It was even more helpless than being a puppet. Fortunately, this experience did not last for too long. The two of them were directly thrown out of this area and sent into the sky, finally regaining control of their bodies. This is the power of a supreme powerhouse. Du Xiaofu stabilized his body high in the sky and narrowed his eyes. There was a strong throbbing in his heart. This kind of power brought about the helpless experience just now. However, at this time, it did not make him feel too much fear. On the contrary, there was an uncontrollable longing in his heart. Even if the suppression between heaven and earth has been completely eliminated, for supreme powerhouses like the lords of the 3,000 upper worlds and the dragon god who came from the outside world, most of their power will still be suppressed when they come to this world. Du Xiaofu secretly guessed, but even with such suppression, the means left behind by the dragon god are still so terrifying. He could not help but sigh. With his current strength, he was not too far away from the heavenly saint realm. However, there was still a big gap between him and a powerhouse like the dragon god. Chapter 25:37. The commotion in the sleeping dragon cave also shook the entire dragons. What happened? This kind of power is so terrifying. It's the unforeseen event in the sleeping dragon cave. Could it be related to Senior Long Gu? No, it's the purple dragon emperor. Senior Long Gu has already been placed out. It should be related to Lord Dragon God. Quickly look, that demon king Du Xiaofu has also been thrown out. The dragons were in an uproar, discussing one after another. That domineering energy surged in all directions, making everyone's scalps tingle. The height of the 3,000 major cosmos lords and the dragon god. I'll be able to reach it one day too. A powerful will rose in Du Xiaofu's heart. In his eyes, the scene in the sleeping dragon cave continued to change. Like a raging sea vortex, the energy frenzy slowly descended, converging toward the bottom. After about half an incense stick's time, all the light disappeared, and this area also returned to its original appearance. The only difference was that after being hit by the energy impact, many of the boulders were shattered. At the same time, little Xingxing's figure also disappeared below. No need to think. The current her must have entered some kind of special space and was receiving the item left behind by the dragon god. We should also go back, Du Xiaofu said softly. This time, the dragons already had the most perfect result. With Long Gu's deterrence, no matter how much the dragons were unconvinced, they could only swallow their broken teeth and blood into their stomachs, and did not dare to have any resistance anymore. Little Xingxing also entered closed-door cultivation. No one knew how long it would take for her to come out. Du Xiaofu himself also had no need to stay any longer. In the outside world, there were still many things waiting for him to do. It could be said that it was imminent and could not be delayed. Senior, I don't know when little Xingxing will be able to come out of closed-door cultivation. I'll have to trouble you to wait here. Du Xiaofu cupped his fists at Long Gu and said, I still have many things to do in the outside world. I'll take my leave first. It's my duty. With me here, Miss will be fine. Rock Emperor, please don't worry. Long Gu replied. The young man in front of him, on one hand, was powerful, and he was Miss's father. Therefore, Long Gu did not put on airs in front of Du Xiaofu. Instead, he was very polite. He addressed him as Rock Emperor. Thank you, Senior. Du Xiaofu, and without speaking, Yi Piaoling, Chong Yu and the other 18 people, and they left Dragons. Without any delay, the group of 19 people went up to the surface of the sea. After that, Du Xiaofu let the 18 celestial generals go ahead and head to the land of the 9 states to investigate the demonic cult's movements and finish their unfinished business. He was of Nin Nai, Du Dragon in Dragon Ren. During this process, Fire Thunder Ancestor had to help. I wonder how little Qilin and the tomboy are doing. Du Xiaofu muttered to himself. Little Qilin, accompanied by Ouyang Shuang, Du Xiaoba, and Du Xiaohuang, went to Tianhuang continent to collect the beasts. Nin wondered how they were doing and if they had encountered any difficulties. Even though these 4 Saint Realm experts could go to most places in this world, they were still able to go to many places. Du Xiaofu was still worried about the devil religion. Just like before he came to Dragons, he did not expect that there would be 2 hidden experts here. If Long Gu had not appeared at the right time, he would not have been in a good situation. His trip to the 4 seas would not have been as smooth as it was now. How long will it take for the demon god to fully recover? I still have plenty of time. Du Xiaofu was worried. There were still many things to be done. Just as he had said to the dragons in the divine temple, preventing the rise of the devil religion and dealing with the demon god was not something that could be done by relying on the strength of one person. All the forces had to be united and work together to have a chance of fighting. However, the situation was very serious now. In Du Xiaofu's heart, he was silently planning his next plan. While searching for the remaining spiritual thunder and the divine thunder cauldron, he also planned to make a trip to the demon realm. That was a region that rarely appeared in front of people. In fact, there must be many powerful cultivators hidden there. If he could rope in their strength to fight against the demon god together, he would be able to increase the strength of his side. I'm almost there. While thinking, Du Xiaofu did not stop. Through the space passage, he traveled quickly. After a few days, he reached the boundary of the central region. This place was not too far away from the desolate country. Because of this, Du Xiaofu slowed down and directly came out of the space passage. By flying, he swept across the land. It has been a long time since I last saw Master, Martial Uncle, and the other seniors and juniors. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but lament. All these years, he had been running around in search of ways to raise his strength. Now, he was even racking his brains to deal with the devil religion. It had indeed been a long time since he last visited the ancient Heaven Sect and the 7-Star Hall. Also, Tianwu Academy had been rebuilt, but he didn't know how it had developed. To Tianwu Academy, Du Xiaofu's heart suddenly became tranquil, and he threw all worldly matters to the back of his mind. At this moment, all he wanted to do was to visit his old friends and visit his old haunts. He had a bad feeling. If he didn't take a look now, it would be difficult for him to have a chance in the future. No one knew what would happen to this world after the devil religion rose again. If things went wrong, the entire mountain and river might shatter and change beyond recognition. Everything he was familiar with would be in danger of being destroyed. In fact, he didn't even know if he could keep his life. He didn't know how many times he would be able to meet his old friends. I wonder how the generals and ghost children are managing Tianwu Academy. Du Xiaofu let out a long sigh of relief as he slowly flew above the clouds. However, he was muttering to himself. Looking at the vast land below, he revealed a smile that he hadn't seen in a long time. He wasn't bothered by the inexplicable fear in his heart. He was looking forward to it, but at the same time, he was also nervous. It was inconceivable for a true Saint Realm consummation expert to have such emotions. However, from the depths of his heart, he hoped that Tianwu Academy would be able to recover from the trauma of the past. In fact, he even hoped that he would see a brand new Tianwu Academy. How could they become even more powerful than before? That was something they would be most happy to see. Chapter 25:38. Roughly a cup of tea's time later, Du Xiaofu landed on a mountain range. Two towering mountain peaks appeared in his field of vision. They were like azure dragons rising into the air and roaring into the sky. At first glance, it looked like it was going to collapse at any moment. A gurgling stream flowed by the side, reflecting the sunlight. On the stone wall to the left, there were 4 words inscribed on it: Tianwu Academy. All of these scenes were so familiar. The only difference was that it lacked the ancient aura that had been accumulated over the years. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's emotions were completely different from when he first arrived here. Back then, he was still inexperienced and insignificant compared to his current strength. As such, he was shocked by the imposing aura. I wonder if the general, Ghost Child, and the others are around? Du Xiaofu smiled as he walked into Tianwu Academy. It had been a few months since he parted with them in the Sacred Hall. It was likely that the few of them were still in Tianwu Academy. With his hands behind his back, Du Xiaofu walked forward and met several young men and women along the way. These people were in the prime of their lives and were brimming with vitality. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but be a little surprised by the strength of many of them. Transcendent martial supremacy. Origin martial supremacy. Du Xiaofu's mouth widened when he saw the 2 young men walking toward him. Back then, even the strongest elder in Tianwu Academy wasn't able to reach such a level. But now, there were 2 such students in a row. However, before he could recover from his shock, he saw another young lady. She looked to be in her 20s, and she had a petite appearance. However, the aura she exuded caused Du Xiaofu to suck in a breath of cold air. Nirvana martial supremacy, Du Xiaofu muttered. After the young lady appeared, a large group of young men followed behind her. However, no one dared to approach her. They could only look at her with envy and admiration from afar. At the same time, some of them dodged her gaze, afraid that they would blaspheme her. Some of the female students were also looking at her with eyes full of admiration. The young girl didn't pay much attention to these scenes and continued to walk on the path with small, quick steps. Suddenly, she seemed to have sensed Du Xiaofu's gaze. She stopped in her tracks, turned around, and looked at Du Xiaofu curiously. Her watery eyes blinked a few times, and she just looked at the purple-robed young man without saying a word. Who is that person? How dare he look at senior sister Yu like that? I don't think I've seen this guy before. Where did he come from? Maybe he's from the Talisman Institution. Look at that pig face. I really want to stamp his face with my foot. Du Xiaofu's dazed gaze had clearly caused many male students to misunderstand, causing them to feel dissatisfied. That was a blasphemy against the goddess, and it was intolerable. They wanted nothing more than to rush up and teach that blind purple-robed young man a lesson so that he would remember this lesson. Say, if the 3 of them were to learn of this, would they beat him up? Someone asked. The 3 of them. When the others heard those words, they shrunk their necks and felt a chill run down their spines. None of them dared to utter a single word. Just as the group of youths were cursing in their hearts, the young girl named Yu walked up to Du Xiaofu. A radiant smile appeared on her face, and she said to Du Xiaofu, "This student, nice to meet you." Nice to meet you." Du Xiaofu replied stiffly. Clearly, this young girl thought of him as a member of Tianwu Academy. He didn't intend to explain himself, so he just went with the flow and agreed to her request. "I don't think I've seen you before. Which institution are you from?" Yu asked with a smile. Her eyes were pure, but a hint of charm could be seen on her face. She was also curious about the purple-robed young man before her. After all, most people in Tianwu Academy didn't dare to get close to her. Yet, the young man before her dared to look at her in such a manner. She couldn't help but feel perplexed. "I'm from the Talisman Institute." Du Xiaofu recovered from his shock and replied casually. Even so, he wasn't spouting nonsense. Back then, he had entered the Talisman Institute. However, he didn't know if the current Tianwu Academy still retained the same structure as before. "So, you're from the Talisman Institute. No wonder I haven't seen you before." Yu was still smiling as she spoke. She nodded as she understood what was going on. Only those fellows from the Talisman Institute, who lived in seclusion and only knew how to tinker with medicinal cauldrons and talisman inscriptions, rarely appeared before others. Thinking about it, this young man's cultivation wasn't too good, and he didn't stand out in Tianwu Academy. Otherwise, as long as he had a bit of fame, there would definitely be people who would recognize him. When the surrounding youths saw you walking up to the purple-robed young man and chatting with him, they felt a tinge of jealousy in their hearts. Our goddess actually spoke to that fellow. If Senior you were to say a single word to me, I'd be willing to shorten my lifespan by 10 years. No, I'd even shorten my lifespan by a single day. Many of them were howling in their hearts, as though pigs were being slaughtered. The whispers of these youths reached Du Xiaofu's ears. Weren't the actions of these youths exactly the same as what he had experienced back then? Regardless of how they viewed him, as an expert, he didn't need to be calculative with them. Du Xiaofu's expression returned to normal. He smiled faintly at Yu and said, "It has been a long time since I left the academy, and I intend to take a stroll around the academy to relieve my boredom. Junior, if you have something on, you can go ahead first." After which, he turned around and walked into the depths of Tianwu Academy with his hands behind his back. The young lady named Yu was stunned for a moment. This young man actually left just like that? If it was anyone else, they would have made use of this opportunity to speak to her. "Fellow student, I'm also thinking of taking a stroll around the academy. Let's go together." Yu suddenly called out, causing Du Xiaofu to halt in his footsteps. He turned around and replied, "Sure." Seeing Du Xiaofu agree to it, Yu felt a strange sweetness in her heart. She chuckled and walked side by side with him. Fuck. Senior Yu is walking together with him. That fellow is so ugly and has a foolish look on his face. What right does he have to walk together with our goddess? I want to die. The group of young men in the surroundings once again erupted into howls and roars of pain and hatred. When Du Xiaofu heard this, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. A smile hung on his face as he scolded softly, "A bunch of brats. How dare you call me ugly? When we return, I'll let the general and the others spank your butts." Chapter 25:39. Translator, Nation Editor. Nation. Du Xiaofu viewed the youths in Tianwu Academy from the perspective of an elder. He couldn't help but reminisce about his hot-blooded and impulsive youth. Along the way with Yu, Zhang Xian learned quite a bit about the current situation in Tianwu Academy. Everything that he saw made Du Xiaofu feel gratified. Under the management of the general, Ghostchild, Gu Xinyan, and the others, Tianwu Academy had recovered from the trauma back then. Most of the students who were fortunate enough to escape with their lives had returned and contributed greatly to the rise of Tianwu Academy. Currently, Tianwu Academy still retained its previous structure, the Martial School and Talisman School. Just like before, the Talisman School consisted of the Alchemy School, Blacksmith School, and Formation School. There was also the martial role. It must have been hard on them all these years. Du Xiaofu lamented. He had been running around for the past few years and didn't bother with the affairs of Tianwu Academy. Everything was left to them. Back then, the Grand Elder had placed all of his hopes on Zhang Xian. Thinking of this, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but blush. He felt deeply indebted to the Grand Elder. "Junior Yu, I can't see through your cultivation. You should be one of the top few on the martial roll." Du Xiaofu pretended to be weak as he spoke to Yu in astonishment. He pretended that he had been in seclusion for too long and was oblivious to the happenings in the outside world. He felt that it wasn't easy for this young lady to reach the nirvana realm at her age. Even though the suppression of the world had been removed and the path of cultivation had become easier, she could still be considered outstanding. Of course, he couldn't compare her to Tyrant Du, Little Xingxing, and Little Qilin. That would be too much of a bully. However, Yu's reaction to Du Xiaofu's question was beyond his expectations. The little girl stroked her jade-like forehead, revealing a sad expression, as if she had thought of something unspeakable. "My little bit of cultivation is nothing in the eyes of those three abnormal fellows." Yu curled her rosy little mouth and said with a bitter smile. Her almond-shaped eyes even carried some annoyance. "Three abnormal guys?" Du Xiaofu was stunned and asked curiously. Seeing Du Xiaofu's astonished expression, Yu stared at him doubtfully. "Student, are you really a student of Tianwu Academy? You don't even know about the three heavenly martial gods." She criticized endlessly in her heart. and she felt that this violet-robed young man had cultivated all day long to the point his brain was damaged. It was fine if he didn't recognize her, but he actually didn't even know those three fellows. He was truly a weirdo. She was the same as well. She had even asked to travel with him out of the blue. Was she stupid as well? Tianwu's three gods. Du Xiaofu repeated this name, feeling that it was somewhat similar to his 13 godly heroes. At the same time, he was very surprised. This little girl was already very powerful. Could it be that there were students who were more talented than her? Moreover, there were three of them? Teng Yimo, Zhang Yixin, Huang Xiaofeng. Have you really never heard of these three names? Yu Yu asked. This, I really haven't. Du Xiaofu replied awkwardly. While blaming himself for failing in his disguise, he urgently said, Junior sister, tell me more about them. Oh, in short, they are three freaks, and at the same time, so weird that they are detestable. Yu Yu bit her red lips with her pearly white teeth. Her tone was filled with helplessness, as though she wasn't willing to say more. I understand. Du Xiaofu rubbed his nose and smiled. Looking at Yu Yu's expression, he could roughly guess what was going on. It must be because those three fellows were pestering Yu Yu endlessly, causing her to be annoyed. However, Du Xiaofu wasn't in a position to comment on this matter. After all, he had been through the era of youth, and he understood everything. At this moment, he was more concerned about how freakish those three fellows were. Could it be that they were three Nirvana realm martial saints? Or perhaps even half-domain realm experts? But seeing that Yu Yu wasn't willing to say more, Du Xiaofu wasn't in a position to probe further. The two of them continued walking together in silence. As Du Xiaofu walked, the scenery along the way was extremely familiar to him. Under the efforts of the general, Ghost Child, and the others, Tianwu Academy had indeed regained its former glory. Furthermore, they had also found many unique items in the outside world for the disciples to cultivate. It was similar to the desolate ancient space back then. The two of them, who were walking side by side, slowly felt a little awkward. When the surrounding young men and women saw this scene, they looked at each other in astonishment. This made Yu Yu feel even more self-satisfied. However, she didn't know what excuse she could use to leave. Right at this moment, a few whistling sounds could be heard from afar. Looking over, a group of figures could be seen flying down from the sky. They seemed to be in a hurry. Many of them were injured, and their auras were weak. They had to rely on their companions to support them. You guys, bring them down to treat their injuries. We'll look for Elder Biming first. A plump young man in the lead instructed, following which, the three of them rushed into the depths of Tianwu Academy. The rest of the people quickly landed on the ground and disappeared into the buildings with their injured companions. When the surrounding students saw this, they instantly burst into an uproar. What happened? That's the three gods Yin. Didn't they go on a mission? Why are they back? A lot of people are injured. I'm afraid they've encountered something big. Quickly go and find out what happened. The three gods Yin went to find the elders. They must have encountered something big. Many students were discussing. Naturally, Du Xiaofu noticed all of this. He narrowed his eyes and scanned the students with his primordial spirit. He discovered that the injuries on the students carried the aura of members of the devil religion. They encountered members of the devil religion. This was Du Xiaofu's first reaction. Student, I'll go take a look at the situation. Feel free to do as you wish. After Yu Yu greeted Du Xiaofu, she immediately unfolded her exquisite figure and headed towards the depths of the building complex. She must have gone to look for the elder Biming that the others were talking about. Du Xiaofu didn't stop Yu Yu, but he didn't follow her either. Du Xiaofu knew the identity of this elder Biming through his primordial spirit. He was his classmate, Biming Feng. Furthermore, he knew that Biming Feng was the only one left in Tianwu Academy. The general, Ghost Child, Gu Xinyan, Gua Xiaofeng, and Wu Kei weren't around. They must have gone outside. Du Xiaofu cast his gaze to the distant horizon. His eyes seemed to be able to see through the boundless void and see through everything. People of the demon sect. He sensed that many experts of the demon sect were rushing over from afar with murderous auras. Chapter 2540. Du Xiaofu sensed the arrival of the devil religion, but he didn't make a move. Instead, he stood on the spot without moving. From the aura of the invaders, he could tell that there were only 3 Saint Realm primary stage cultivators among them. It wasn't a particularly powerful lineup. Even though Tianwu Academy might not be able to deal with such a situation easily, they shouldn't be completely helpless. However, Du Xiaofu couldn't understand. Since the devil religion was here to invade, why didn't the 9 demon emperors appear? He had no idea what they were up to. The members of the devil religion moved swiftly, and soon they were within 10 li of Tianwu Academy. At this moment, a commotion could be heard from the depths of Tianwu Academy. Numerous figures soared into the sky and headed in the direction of the devil religion's invasion. The leader of the group was a young man with a handsome face, a straight nose, and eyes as black as ink. He exuded the aura of a Saint Realm cultivator. This person was someone that Du Xiaofu was familiar with, Bai Mingfeng, one of the elders of Tianwu Academy. The devil religion is here to invade. All students, heed my command. Those below Martial Saint Realm, retreat immediately. Those above Martial Saint Realm, follow me to face the enemy. A loud voice boomed, reverberating throughout the entire Tianwu Academy, following which, batch after batch of students soared into the sky with a sword in their hands. Resplendent rays of light shone from their swords as they interweaved in the air. Those who offend our Tianwu Academy shall be killed without mercy. The members of the devil religion are wreaking havoc in the world. They deserve death. Students, let us kill all of the members of the devil religion. Kill. In an instant, the entire Tianwu Academy was filled with deafening roars, and battle cries filled the air. Students above Martial Saint Realm soared into the sky and followed behind Bai Mingfeng and the others, heading in the direction of the devil religion. Du Xiaofu watched everything quietly. He had no intention of interfering. He turned his gaze to Bai Mingfeng, who had already flown out of Tianwu Academy, and the 3 youths behind him. At this moment, Bai Mingfeng's cultivation had already reached the peak of the initial Sage Realm. He was only 1 step away from entering the intermediate Sage Realm. This kind of strength was also quite terrifying. What made Du Xiaofu feel even more incredulous was the 3 youths behind him. These 3 people all looked to be less than 20 years old. The first one was a plump fatty. His small eyes were squinting and glowing. At a glance, one could feel a trace of sinister aura from it. The second young man was not tall, but he was extremely sturdy. His muscles were knotted together, and he had explosive strength. Without a doubt, this was someone with an extremely powerful physical body. The third person was like a tall bamboo pole, but he was not skinny. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and a faint smile hung on his face. With just a glance, Du Xiaofu was able to clearly gauge the strength of these 3 youths. These 3 had all reached the martial domain realm. Furthermore, he wasn't an ordinary initial domain cultivator, but a sealed domain cultivator. One had to know that they were not even 20 years old yet. Du Xiaofu was extremely shocked. When he was their age, he wasn't that strong. Are they the 3 gods of Tianwu that Yu mentioned? Du Xiaofu muttered to himself. He still remembered that Yu had mentioned their names, Teng Emo, Zhang Yishan, and Huang Xiaofeng. The strength of these 3 youths was truly terrifying. It was no wonder that Yu would be so helpless when they were mentioned. With their presence on this year's martial ranking, the other students would probably feel sad for them. Just as Du Xiaofu was pondering, he saw a black cloud rapidly flying into the outer mountain range. With his strength, he naturally didn't attract the attention of the 3 youths. Even Bai Mingfeng didn't notice anything strange. Bai Mingfeng stood in the air, his clothes fluttering in the wind. He held a long saber in his hand and stared at the black cloud. Kikik, Tianwu Academy, after being destroyed back then, you actually dared to rebuild it. Fine. I'll raise this place to the ground today. After the black cloud arrived, it dispersed, revealing over 100 figures. The leader of the group was shrouded in demonic aura, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He could only smile eerily at Bai Mingfeng and the others. Thieves from the devil religion. How dare you boast so shamelessly in my Tianwu Academy? Bai Mingfeng replied coldly. Kikik, you don't even know that you're about to die. Are you still counting on your elders? Right now, they should be busy with their own affairs. Kakik, the leader of the devil religion, laughed eerily. His words shocked Bai Mingfeng and the other students. They knew that the elders that the devil religion leader was talking about were undoubtedly the general, Ghost Child, and Guo Xiaofeng. Judging from his words, it seemed like they were about to face a huge problem. This caused everyone to be worried. Du Xiaofu naturally thought of this as well and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. There's no need to waste our breath on these people from the devil religion. Activate the formation so that none of them will be able to escape. Behind Bai Mingfeng, the plump young man narrowed his eyes and said, after which, he instructed the guards of Tianwu Academy to activate the heavenly opening mountain barrier formation. The devil religion only had 3 Saint Realm experts. With the might of Tianwu Academy's formation and the cooperation of the other experts, it wasn't difficult for them to keep them here. Du Xiaofu nodded his head in approval at the plump young man's actions. The young man's actions were exactly as he had expected. Furthermore, he intended to make a move himself to resolve the problem here as soon as possible. After which, he would try to find out the general and the others' whereabouts. If they were to encounter any trouble, he would be able to help them as soon as possible. However, just as Du Xiaofu was about to make a move, 10 zhang away from those from the devil religion, a ripple suddenly appeared in the air. Du Xiaofu's eyes twitched as he sensed an even more powerful aura. Clearly, an expert had arrived. Tianwu Academy, let's disappear today. The deep voice of an elder sounded from the air, following which, the space suddenly exploded. At the same time as the elder's voice sounded, a spatial tear tore open in the sky. The surrounding space began to crumble as an incomparably scorching aura descended. As the scorching aura spread out, a thin figure descended from the sky. With the appearance of this person, the surrounding space seemed to have frozen. Everyone from Tianwu Academy, including Bai Mingfeng, felt an indescribable pressure in their hearts. Saint Beast Realm Consummation. Bai Mingfeng's expression changed. This aura didn't seem to be inferior to Huolei Laozu's. Upon seeing the figure, Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes. Chapter 2541. Translator. Nation Editor. Nation. The person who appeared was an old man in green robes. On his aged face, a pair of deep eyes flickered with a bright light. Seeing such a figure, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but feel deeply surprised. He had interacted with him many times in the ancient, desolate, ominous grounds. Dragon Desolate Ancestor? Du Xiaofu muttered. That's right. The old man was the Dragon Desolate Ancestor of the 8 Desolation Demonic Dragon Tribe. After the Battle of the Beast Alliance, Ancestor Zhangjie and Ancestor Fengsan were killed by Du Xiaofu. When the Dragon Desolate Ancestor saw that the situation was bad, he fled. Ancestor Xiaotian and the others chased after him but failed and could only let him escape. After the chaos of the Beast Alliance was quelled, the entire 8 Desolation Demonic Dragon Tribe was cleansed. It was just that recently, no one had heard of any traces of the Dragon Desolate Ancestor in the outside world, and no one knew his whereabouts. Who would have thought that the Dragon Desolate Ancestor would appear in Tianwu Academy today? Furthermore, he had come with the devil religion. Du Xiaofu was astonished. It seems like the Dragon Desolate Ancestor is colluding with the devil religion. Du Xiaofu's eyes flickered as he muttered to himself. He was still wondering why none of the 9 demon sovereigns appeared when the devil religion invaded Tianwu Academy. Instead, there were only 3 sage initial stage cultivators. It was no different from striking a rock with an egg. At this moment, he finally understood. Even though the Dragon Desolate Ancestor suffered a setback in the Battle of the Beast Alliance, his terrifying strength was unquestionable. With him leading over 100 experts from the devil religion, it would be easy for them to flatten Tianwu Academy. Of course, that was if he wasn't here. At this moment, the Dragon Desolation Ancestor appeared and immediately flew out. A huge dragon claw swept across the sky and tore space into pieces. A terrifying temperature rose. A vast dragon's might spread out and suppressed everyone in Tianwu Academy, making it hard for them to breathe. A claw struck down, aiming directly at Bai Mingfeng's head. Even with Bai Mingfeng's cultivation, He could feel his scalp going numb in the face of such power. With a single glance, he knew that there was no way he could fight back. "Let's fight." Bai Mingfeng gritted his teeth. The hair on his head danced in the wind. The long saber in his hand swung vertically, creating a sea of blazing fire. The space was distorted by the heat, and a 300-meter-long fire dragon roared fiercely, pouncing towards the dragon claw of the dragon desolate ancestor. At the same time, he bellowed, "Tianwu Academy Protection Formation, defend Tianwu Academy to the death." Bai Mingfeng understood that if there were no accidents, it would be very difficult to resist the devil religion's attack today. He had seen the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch in the Beast Alliance before, so he naturally knew how terrifying he was. This place was not far from the desolate country, but the difference between his men and the people from the devil religion was too great. By the time the experts from the desolate country received the news and rushed over, Tianwu Academy would probably be no more. Even so, he wouldn't let them succeed so easily. Even if he had to die, he would make the devil religion suffer. As Bai Mingfeng spoke, the attack in his hand clashed with the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch's. "Kill all these insignificant insects and flatten this place." A low bellow came from the devil religion. Immediately, over 100 experts pounced towards the group of students. "We swear to defend Tianwu Academy to the death. Fuck the devil religion." At the same time, the third god of Tianwu behind Bai Mingfeng did not hesitate and took the lead to attack. Some of the disciples were already prepared. They planned to activate the protection formation and borrow the power of the talisman array to fight to the death with the devil religion. However, before the two sides could truly engage in battle, the battle between the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch and Bai Mingfeng seemed to have come to an end. With a swipe of the gigantic dragon claw, it pierced through Bai Mingfeng's saber light. Following that, the dragon claw did not lose its momentum. Like pulling chestnuts out of a fire, it abruptly imprinted itself on the young man's chest. A muffled groan accompanied by a dull thud sounded. High up in the sky, Bai Mingfeng's body arched like a prawn and flew backwards like a kite with a broken string. Fresh blood spurted out from his mouth like a fountain. As Bai Mingfeng's body flew backwards, a long line of blood appeared in the sky. The blood of a sage expert dyed the sky red. With vast energy, it corroded the sky, leaving black marks. "Little brat, you can't stop me." The Dragon Wilderness Patriarch snorted coldly. Standing in the sky, he instructed the other experts of the devil religion, "Quickly clean up these lowly ants and find that item." After the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch finished speaking, his old body swayed slightly and rushed out again. In a flash, he arrived in front of Bai Mingfeng. "You can die now." The Dragon Wilderness Patriarch softly spat out such a sentence and stretched out his hand. In his palm, a dazzling light bloomed like the sun in the sky. Majestic energy surged wildly. Under the influence of the energy, the mountain range below and the buildings of Tianwu Academy began to rumble and shake. The dragon claw was like a hook. A domineering aura swept out and grabbed at Bai Mingfeng. Under the dragon claw, the young man's body appeared extremely weak, like a little chick. If this attack landed, with the strength of the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch, even if Bai Mingfeng did not die, he would suffer immeasurable injuries. "Die!" the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch shouted. However, in the next moment, his dragon claw did not hit Bai Mingfeng. Instead, it grabbed onto a ball of lightning. Boom! Chila! The lightning suddenly exploded. A terrifying aura instantly spread out, and an incomparably terrifying explosion occurred. The domineering energy wantonly spread out and pierced through the 9 heavens and 10 lands. The talismans and mystic runes fluttered wildly and whistled in all directions. The large mountain range below everyone's feet was instantly flattened and turned into ruins. At the same time, the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch quickly retracted his hand and staggered back. The flesh on the dragon claw was charred black and the skin and flesh were curled up. There were even thin arcs of electricity swirling around it. "How can this be?" the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch exclaimed in shock. He had not recovered from this inexplicable situation at all and did not understand what had happened. However, in his eyes, after the lightning slowly dissipated, the figure of a purple-robed young man was revealed. "It's you." Looking at the appearance of such a figure, the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch was extremely surprised and shocked. However, at the same time, he recognized Du Xiaofu and immediately understood. Du Xiaofu appeared out of nowhere and stood in front of Bai Mingfeng, blocking the attack that Bai Mingfeng had prepared for. The Dragon Wilderness Patriarch had seen such a strange technique in the Battle of the Beast Alliance. It was because of this that Du Xiaofu was able to catch the Dragon Wilderness Patriarch off guard and kill him, tearing him in half.